Chapter 586. When she arrived at the hospital, she learned that he had been sent to the hospital with acute gastritis yesterday and had been transferred to a general ward for an anti-inflammatory injection today. Jinwan called Secretary Yang again. After confirming the situation, she bought some liquid nutrition product for gastritis near the hospital and brought them in. Because they had come to Beijing on a temporary business trip, there were no family members or people from the company here. Yesterday, some business partners must have come to visit, so today the ward was particularly quiet. Seeing Jinwan come, Secretary Yang went out. Jinwan walked over and saw Mr. Vince leaning against the bed with a pale face. He was still receiving in 4, and there were several needle marks on the back of his hand. It could be seen that he had received a lot of anti-inflammatory injections. What did I tell you the other day? I told you to go to the hospital as soon as possible, but you didn't listen and suddenly became so serious. Did you go out to socialize and drink when your stomach was uncomfortable these days? Jinwan put down the nutrition products in her hand. Seeing her come, Mr. Vince was in a good mood, although his face was not healthy. He said with a smile, "I thought I could hold on. It's just gastritis, but I didn't expect to be knocked down by a few glasses of wine." Jinwan looked at him speechlessly and took the thermometer from his bedside. "It's all right. It seems that you don't have a fever anymore." Secretary Yang said that she didn't know you had a high fever until yesterday. Your secretary is not very reliable. That day in the exhibition hall, I knew you had a fever. Why didn't she find out? She didn't stay in the same hotel as me. I asked her to go to several districts around Beijing for inspection and didn't ask her to follow me all the time, Mr. Vince explained. No wonder. Jinwan sighed. The doctor said it's all right, right? Just gastritis? Mr. Vince nodded with a faint smile. What else could it be? If it were any other serious illness, do you think Secretary Yang would have the time to leave the ward to the two of us? Jinwan, at this time, he still didn't forget to flirt with a girl. She opened the things that she had bought. I bought some powders or pastes that are suitable for brewing. In your current condition, you should only be able to eat liquid food for a few days. Take care of your stomach and don't drink for a while. People like us are always envied by others. It looks like we're especially rich, have a smooth life, and don't have to worry about anything. However, most of our investments and business deals were negotiated over drinks. Do you think that BGY's general manager is a freeloader? Talking about business while drinking is also a skill. It's much more useful than your drinking capacity of a few glasses. Jinwan chuckled. That's right. Being a poor drinker has its advantages. At least it won't irritate your stomach like this. I think you're risking your life to do business. It's not as serious as you make it out to be. Have you ever been drunk before? Mr. Vince asked with a smile, even though he knew the answer. Jinwan paused, but her hands didn't stop unpacking the supplements. She just said lightly, I was drunk, but I haven't been drunk for a long time. All these years in London, she had actually been slightly drunk. Although she said she was drunk, she wasn't completely drunk. At the very least, she had always been sober. All these years, she had to maintain her sobriety at all times to prevent her heart from falling. Their conversation shifted from wine to other topics. Jinwan was used to talking about work in front of Mr. Vince. In the past, it was like this in London, and it was the same after returning to China. In the past, to prevent him from talking about their relationship and causing awkwardness, she would always find topics to talk about. Now, she didn't need to deliberately find topics to talk about, but this habit of talking had been formed. But this was also good. At the very least, it wouldn't be awkward. What exactly is going on between you and CEO Mo? After chatting for 2 hours in the ward, Jinwan originally planned to let Mr. Vince close his eyes and sleep for a while. But after a moment of silence, his voice suddenly rang again. This time, it was no longer just about work. Jinwan's hand that was casually flipping through the phone paused slightly. She looked up at him and happened to meet Mr. Vince's eyes. Her eyes fell back on the phone, and her fingers slid open WeChat. She replied to Xia Tian, who had just sent her message. Then she accidentally saw the WeChat message below that she hadn't replied to. The man's name was still blank, and so was his WeChat moments, but his profile picture was still hers. He hadn't changed it, or he didn't intend to change it at all. She gently pressed the screen of the phone with her finger and smiled. What else could it be? We were just married before. Later, when we were in the same business circle, we inevitably met and had some minor friction. It seems that he doesn't intend to let you go. How'd you two get divorced? Are you sure you've already divorced? Jinwon didn't understand why he asked this. She immediately felt a little amused. I signed the divorce agreement. After that, I went to the UK. As for the divorce procedures, I think even if I didn't go to the Civil Affairs Bureau in person, he would have the ability to handle the divorce. Why do you ask me this? Mr. Vince's expression faltered. You didn't go to the Civil Affairs Bureau? Jinwon also paused, feeling that he seemed to be implying something. Why? Mr. Vince's eyes darkened, but he sighed helplessly with a smile. Jinwon, this is a society ruled by law. Since your marriage with Mo Jingshin was carried out in China, not registered abroad, a divorce is not as simple as a piece of paper. No matter how capable he is to complete the divorce in China, in addition to your signature, he has to go to the Civil Affairs Bureau in person. Even if Mo Jingshin is the king of heaven, he can't do it for you in person. The corner of Jinwon's mouth twitched, and a corner of her heart sank. What do you mean? Although this is not a very optimistic situation for me, I still suggest you re-examine your relationship with Mo Jingshin. Are you sure you're divorced? Jinwon, how could he not be divorced? For the sake of her life, Mo Jingshin had made such a huge change. He had forced her to leave and forced her to live in England alone. She had to face the unknown for the next 3 years alone. He had even taken the cruelest step. How could he not divorce her? Besides, he had sent the divorce agreement to her first, and she had sent it back to him after signing it. Although the man's column was blank when she signed it, he should have signed it immediately after receiving it. Signing divorce, every step was the same as in her previous life. Chapter 587. Unless, in her previous life, they hadn't divorced completely. Seeing Jinwon's bewitched look, Mr. Vince frowned. Have you ever seen what a divorce certificate looks like? Jinwon put her hand on her lap and didn't speak. She just looked up at him. Aren't there many kinds of divorces in China? With the power of the Mo family and Mo Jingshin's ability, as long as I sign my name, I can get it done, can't I? Mr. Vince gave a rare sneer. Naive. Jinwon didn't speak. In the afternoon, she sat with Mr. Vince in the hospital for a while and talked about other things. At sunset, when the doctor came into the ward to take him for a stomach examination, Jinwon got up and left. On the way back to the hotel, she took out her mobile phone and looked up various questions on the internet about whether a person must be present in the divorce proceedings. The answers she found were all the same. Both parties must be present at the same time. This was a legal condition for divorce proceedings. The taxi stopped in front of the hotel. The driver looked back at her, only to see that she looked puzzled after looking at her cell phone. Then she closed her eyes and leaned against the seat as if she was about to fall asleep. The driver stopped the car and woke her up. Miss, we've arrived. Are you not feeling well? Do you need me to take you to the hospital? Jinwon immediately opened her eyes, which were not sleepy at all. No. With that, she paid a taxi fare and got out of the car. Before returning to her room, she picked up her cell phone and wanted to call Mo Jingshin to ask him about it. However, when she thought of a certain possibility and recalled how heartless she had been to him that day, she felt it was unnecessary to call him now. Forget it. She'd better finish the business in Jing City as soon as possible and go back to High City as soon as possible. The next morning, when Jinwon woke up and turned on her cell phone, she was suddenly bombarded by several messages. Xiaotian, what happened to you? Picture. Jinwon zoomed in on the picture Xiaotian sent and saw that it was a gossip section of a financial newspaper. There was a color photo on it. The scene in the photo was Mr. Vince Ward in the hospital yesterday. Jinwon was feeding Mr. Vince, and both of them had smiles on their faces. They seemed to be very close. From the angle of the photo, one could tell that it was taken by a medical staff or a passerby through the small square window on the door of the ward. They didn't expect that people in the business circle like them would be recognized by passersby and even spread the photo as gossip. The business world wasn't as complicated as the entertainment world, but some famous bosses or top-notch professionals were often interviewed by the media. Gradually, people would recognize them. What's more, the real estate industry had gained a lot of attention in the country. Therefore, many people had seen the names and photos of some of the people in charge of large domestic real estate groups like BGY. The caption on the photo was, "The reason why Forbes #1 young female entrepreneur returned to China was because she fell in love with BGY Group's general manager." After seeing this report, Jinwan didn't reply to Xia Tian's message. Instead, she made a phone call and asked someone to inform the media to quickly withdraw this messy news. MN Group might not be powerful enough to turn the clouds and rain over their hands, but she still had the ability to suppress this kind of gossip in the small financial news media. Furthermore, financial newspapers didn't have as much attention as entertainment newspapers. She had to withdraw the news and the photo before it was spread out. After dealing with the media, persuading, pressuring, and several other methods were used, the other party finally obediently withdrew the report that was originally going to be posted online. They also planned to publicly apologize for the false report and the act of fabricating a story based on the photos submitted by passersby in the newspaper tomorrow. It was already afternoon. Jinwan had several social engagements to attend today. She was going to have dinner with several partners in Beijing, so it was inevitable that she would drink some wine. She had booked a car in advance to pick her up at the club when it was time. After arriving at the entertainment club, Jinwan shook hands and chatted with the bosses of several business partners. Because they were all old friends who had worked with her for a long time, Jinwan didn't feel particularly restrained tonight. She didn't restrain herself when eating and drinking. Of course, she knew her alcohol tolerance, so she didn't drink too much. During this time, there were many people who asked her about the news with Mr. Vince today. Jinwan smiled and said she was just going to visit an old friend. However, she didn't expect that a passerby would take a photo of her outside the ward and spread it. She explained that she had been single all these years and that if she really had a boyfriend one day, she would make it clear. Seeing that her words were very clear and that there were not so many messy rumors in this circle, they laughed it off and continued to talk about business as usual. In the second half of the show, it was already 10 o'clock at night. It was raining heavily outside the club, so the bosses suggested waiting for the rain to stop. They arranged a large room in the club to play cards, sing, and drink a few cups of wine. Jinwan was slightly tipsy. She was in a good mood because she had just talked about a very good project, so she wanted to join the fun. After 3 rounds of drinking in the private room, the bosses were playing cards. Jinwan drank a little too much tonight. Holding a can of beer that had just been opened, she walked to a corner of the luxury private room on the top floor of the club and looked at the semi-curved French windows. It was raining heavily outside. She held the beer in one hand and pressed the other against the window. Through the thick glass, she looked down at the lights of Beijing. But she was not in the mood to appreciate the rain and the waning lights. Her mind kept echoing with Mr. Vince's words about whether she was really divorced. The more she thought about it, the more she drank, and the more sober she became. It was almost 12 o'clock at night, but the rain did not stop and was even getting heavier. The car Jinwan had booked had been parked outside for a long time. The driver called her several times, but she did not answer. The private room was too noisy, and Jinwan did not hear it at all. Because she drank too much, she forgot that the driver would come and pick her up. When Jinwan finally remembered it, it was already 12:30 at night. She picked up her cell phone and called the driver, staggering out as she spoke. She had just arrived at the elevator door and was about to step in when she saw Mo Jingshin suddenly appear in the elevator. She paused in her footsteps. Dash. Chapter 588. The moment she met the man's gaze in the elevator, Jinwan's legs froze. Was she hallucinating because she drank too much? Why did Mo Jingshin come here at this time? However, before she could say anything, the man walked out expressionlessly and glanced at the room behind her, which reeked of alcohol and was still filled with people singing in karaoke. Jinwan tried to straighten herself up, but the man only approached her. She subconsciously tried to move aside, but the moment she moved, she swayed. Just as she was about to fall, her waist was suddenly tightened. Mo Jingshin easily held her waist and then lowered his eyes to coldly glance at her. First, you went to the ward to flirt with that person from BGY, And then you came out in the middle of the night to socialize and drink with these people. You even got yourself drunk. Is this how you use the reason you don't love me to declare war on me? Jean Wan's mind was in a mess. She couldn't understand what he was saying at all. She instinctively raised her hand to push him away, but the moment her hand touched the man's shoulder, her whole body fell uncontrollably into his arms. The moment her head bumped against his chest, she frowned and struggled to move back, but the man held her in his arms and showed no signs of letting her go. "Mo Jingshun, let go of me. I'm not drunk." Jean Wan heard the elevator door open and close. She staggered as she was held by the man into the elevator. Finally, she was brought in. She raised her hand and pushed and hammered him twice, but she couldn't push him away, so she gave up struggling and just leaned in his arms, motionless. However, the more she breathed in the familiar scent of the man, the more drunk she seemed to be. She tried to shake her head to clear her head, but before she could move her head, the hand that was on her shoulder pressed her down heavily, and her entire body was pressed into his embrace. You. Jean Wan's face was pressed against his chest. For a moment, she could barely breathe. She forced her head away, but her mouth was moaning. "I'm really not drunk. I can still recognize you as Mo Jingshun." Really, the man didn't speak again until she was taken out of the club. There was a car parked in front of the door. Jean Wan looked outside and suddenly smiled, mumbling, it's raining, it's raining so heavily, good." Before she finished speaking, the man pressed her head into the car. Jean Wan was pressed into the car. She was so drunk that it was impossible for her to sit in the passenger seat. Now, she was almost lying on the back seat. She tried to get up, but after a long time, she could only lie there weakly. Then she frowned and held her stomach. This posture made the liquor in her stomach shake back and forth, and she felt a little nauseous. "Do you want to throw up?" Seeing her holding her stomach, the man asked before closing the car door. Jean Wan didn't respond and still lay on the back seat. She wanted to move, but she didn't have the strength. As soon as she moved, she felt dizzy and her stomach churned. Seeing that she didn't speak, Mo Jingshun closed the car door. The car drove fast. The driver and the car that Jean Wan had arranged to pick her up were left outside the club. She couldn't remember anything at all. The hotel she was staying in was not very far from the club, but it was still 5 miles away from Shangtang Hotel. The car stopped at the door of her hotel. In the heavy rain, the car was washed by the rain and glowed coldly. The moment the door opened, Jean Wan suddenly sat up with strength. When the man was about to take her out, she pushed him away hard, jumped out of the car, rushed into the rain, and vomited on the ground. She had endured until now and didn't vomit on the car, which was the last reason she had in her drunken appearance. Ugh! After vomiting for a long time, she only vomited a lot of alcohol. She didn't eat much in the evening, but she drank a lot, especially a lot of beer. Jean Wan's alcohol tolerance was only limited to foreign wine or champagne, but she still couldn't handle domestic white wine and beer. Fortunately, the rain was so heavy that the alcohol she vomited was instantly washed into the roadside sewer and disappeared in the blink of an eye. After vomiting out a lot of alcohol in her stomach, Jean Wan's legs softened and she almost knelt on the ground. At the moment when her knees almost touched the ground, her abdomen suddenly tightened, and the man took her into his arms in time. He looked down at her who was standing in the rain, but still hadn't woken up and still had a dazed expression. The man's expression was cold as he lifted her up in his arms and helped her stand firmly. "Do you still want to throw up?" he asked. His tone was obviously angry, but he didn't take it too seriously because she was not sober enough. Jean Wan looked at the man in front of her in a daze, shook her head, and then suddenly looked like she was going to vomit again. She tried to push him away again, but this time, she didn't push him away. He took her to the side and helped her bend over to vomit, lest she lost her balance and fell to the ground. This time, she didn't vomit much. She probably drank too much and stayed in the car for so long. She felt so uncomfortable because of car sick and the after effects of being drunk. After vomiting for a while, Jean Wan was completely exhausted and didn't even have the strength to struggle in Mo Jingshun's arms. She leaned weakly in the man's arms with her legs weak. Seeing that she was almost done vomiting, Mo Jingshin carried her in his arms and strode into the hotel. The hotel staff saw Jin Wan, who was soaked in the rain, being carried in by a man who was also soaked in the rain. The staff had an impression of Jin Wan and knew that she lived here, but the man carrying her, originally, they wanted to step forward to ask or help. But when the man carried her into the elevator, he cast a cold glance at them, causing them to stop in their tracks. They didn't dare to take a step closer. Jin Wan's room card had her floor and room number written on it. When she was carried in, she frowned and subconsciously raised her hand to scratch the door, mumbling, "No, Mo Jingshin. This is where I live. Get out." The man didn't seem to hear what she was muttering and directly brought her in. Chapter 589. Jin Wan was placed on the sofa. Her wet hair stuck to her neck and cheeks. Her eyes, red from the alcohol, were slightly open. She stared blankly at the man in front of her, who did not lose any of his temperament even after being drenched in the rain. Since she said those words to him that day, she had not thought of facing him again. Right now, her head was dizzy and her body was heavy. She simply sat on the sofa and did not move. Although Jin Wan had drunk too much, her habits in recent years had allowed her to maintain a little bit of rationality. Even if she was really drunk, she would not talk nonsense. Even if she really wanted this man to get out of her room, she raised her hand slightly, put it down, and did not speak in the end. After getting drunk and vomiting, the only thing left to do now was probably sleep. However, the man's voice rang when her thoughts were about to return to chaos. "You were just drenched in the rain. Do you want to go in and take a shower? Or do you want me to take off your clothes here?" Jin Wan's mind paused. She opened her eyes and looked at the man in front of her in a daze. "You don't talk nonsense. Go in and take a shower." Jin Wan looked at him and then at the bathroom not far behind him and did not move. It was not until the man bent down to carry her from the sofa into the bathroom that she hurriedly dodged his hand as if she had been electrocuted. She staggered to her feet and walked to the bathroom, but still could not stand steadily because of the alcohol. She supported her hand on the wall for a while before she walked in and closed the door. She was not in the mood to take a bath, so she just turned on the shower head to wash herself. Then she remembered that she had just vomited, so she grabbed the spare disposable toothpaste and toothbrush in the hotel bathroom. After brushing for a long time, she did not know if there was any taste of alcohol on her body or in her mouth. She lowered her head and sniffed, but could not smell anything. She stood under the shower head in a daze. Her eyes were still a little dazed, and she could not stay completely sober, but she still remembered that Mo Jingshin was outside, so she took a little longer to shower. Half an hour later, she put on a bathrobe, casually dried her hair, and went out. When she went out, her hair was still dripping, and the water droplets submerged in the bathrobe, making it a little cold. She showered after being drenched in the rain, but the man was not in a hurry to shower. His soaked suit jacket was thrown on the sofa in the room that could only accommodate 2 people. Due to the color of his black shirt and trousers, it was hard to see any changes after being drenched. Jin Wan stood outside the bathroom door, but her footing was a little unstable. She turned around and leaned against the wall to support herself. She forced herself to stay sober as she said, "My work in Jing City is almost done. Tonight is my last social engagement. Perhaps thinking that I can return to High City tomorrow. I felt relieved and drank a little more, but I'm not too drunk." Hearing that she would return to High City tomorrow, the man did not move, but his eyes fell on her. Because Jin Wan had just showered and was drunk, her cheeks looked redder than usual, and her eyes were dazed. She was not as firm and indifferent as she had been that day when she stood in front of him and said that she no longer loved him. She stood against the wall and said indifferently, "My ticket back to High City has been booked. The flight is tomorrow afternoon." The man just sat there coldly and quietly watching her. Jin Wan raised her hand to touch her still wet hair. When she felt the water on her head, she frowned uncomfortably. She wanted to go back to the bathroom to get a towel to wipe her hair, but then she paused and thought of something. She said, "Did you see the news that I went to the hospital yesterday?" She paused and said, "In the past 3 years, if I had accepted any man's pursuit, I wouldn't have been able to stand here now, whether it was Mr. Vince or any other man. When I didn't know the reason for the divorce, after the divorce, I had the right to pursue happiness at any time. Even if I really have an ambiguous relationship with any man, or have feelings beyond friendship, it doesn't violate any morality, and it can't even be considered as having an affair. Besides, she had rejected Mr. Vince countless times and had never responded to him emotionally. This time, it was only because Mr. Vince was sick that she took the initiative to care about him. In her eyes, she only stood on the side of friendship. She was used to doing things her own way and didn't care what others thought. Perhaps because she hadn't vomited all the wine in her stomach, or perhaps because it was too hot when she took a shower in the bathroom. Jean-Wan could only stay awake for a moment. She couldn't remember what she was saying, but from the man's eyes, she could see that she seemed to be saying something particularly heartless. She still felt like vomiting, so she turned back to the bathroom and retched into the toilet, but nothing came out. The man didn't say anything because of what she said just now. He threw a towel to her head. "Wipe your hair clean. I'm going to buy some hangover medicine." Jean-Wan didn't speak. She just raised her hand and pressed the towel that almost covered her entire head over her head. It wasn't until she heard the door open and close that she pulled the towel down and wiped her face mechanically. After drying her hair, Jean-Wan walked out of the bathroom. She was a little thirsty and went to pour herself a glass of water. However, while her body was weak, she couldn't even hold the glass firmly. The glass of hot water that wasn't hot fell to the ground before it reached her mouth. Fortunately, the water wasn't hot. Jean-Wan stood by the table, watching the water spilled on the carpet and the glass that fell to the side. She stared blankly for a long while before she came back to herself. She raised her eyes and looked out the window at the heavy rain that was still falling. The floor she lived on was very high. What floor was it? It seemed to be the 30th floor of a hotel. From here, she could see half of Jing City brightly lit under the rainy night. Jean-Wan poured herself another glass of water and carefully picked up the glass to drink, but her hands were still so weak that she could barely hold it. She held the glass with both hands, but in the end, before the water reached her mouth, it spilled all over her. She gave up and kicked away the 2 cups that had fallen to the ground with an ugly expression. She raised her hand and touched the wet bathrobe. She felt a little hot in her head and listened to the sound of rain outside the window. She really wanted to feel the cool breeze to wake herself up. Chapter 590. So cold, so comfortable. In the past few years, because of her cold body, she had been very careful not to touch or drink anything cold. Even on the hottest days of summer, she did not dare to drink ice water. Suddenly standing on the ice-cold ground full of water stains, with the cool rain falling on his head, extinguishing the unreasonable heat on his body. It was really comfortable. Jean-Wan stood numbly on the balcony, facing the rain and wind. She closed her eyes and allowed her freshly showered body to be baptized by the heavy rain again. She allowed her shoulder-length hair to fall on her shoulders and breathe in the damp and cold smell of the rain. In her handbag in the room, her cell phone rang. Jean-Wan ignored it as though she did not hear it. She opened her eyes slightly to watch the heavy rain, a smile on her lips. The rain was so heavy that she did not hear the sound of Jingshan opening the door when he came back. When she finally heard the sound, the man had already pushed open the half-closed floor-to-ceiling window behind her, making a loud noise. Jean-Wan was so frightened by this voice that her shoulders involuntarily shrank back. She turned around, her eyes blurred by the rain as she stared at the man whose expression was cold and ugly. "What are you doing?" The man's voice was even colder than the autumn rain. Jean-Wan, who originally felt very comfortable in the rain, could not help but shiver in her heart. She looked at him in a daze, and her lips, which had been washed white by the rain, moved. Watching the rain, Jean-Wan's current appearance was indeed sober, but it was also true that she had drunk too much. Her hair was all wet, and the wet bathrobe was cold and heavy on her body. The towel that she had used to dry her hair was placed on her shoulders to withstand the baptism of the autumn rain, and her face was full of rain. But this indescribable abjection made it seem as though she had shed the cold and arrogant mask of the past 3 years, shed the so-called shell of no love, and stood here in a daze. Jean tilted her head slightly, and from the corner of her eyes, she saw that the man was holding something he had just bought from the pharmacy. Who would have thought that the great Mo Jingshin would one day run an errand in the rain to buy medicine in the middle of the night? He was clearly also wet, but he always made it seem as though she was the one in a more sorry state. She could not help but smile again. However, she laughed until the man's face turned even uglier. Jean-Wan's wrist was suddenly tightened, and before she could make a sound, she was dragged from the balcony into the window by the man. Then the floor-to-ceiling window was slammed shut, and the curtains were blown up by the wind from the force of the slamming of the window. In the end, the curtains fluttered back into the window. You just took a shower, and now you're out in the rain. Don't you feel how cold and bone-chilling the autumn rain is in Beijing? With the way you torment yourself, I think you won't be allowed to board the plane tomorrow afternoon because of your high fever. The man gripped her wrist tightly, causing Jean-Wan to stumble and almost fall into his arms. She managed to steady herself, but still swayed because her legs were weak and her head was dizzy. The man's hand caught her waist at the right time, preventing her from falling down. Because of her swaying and the sudden strength of his hand on her waist, Jean-Wan felt her entire body tremble. The feeling of the world spinning came back again. She immediately narrowed her eyes and furrowed her brows, but did not explain anything. She pursed her lips and pushed him away. If it weren't for the fact that Jean-Wan's complexion was too pale, Mo Jingshin would definitely have said harsher words. However, seeing that the little woman was so drunk that she could not tell north from south and was forcing herself to act as though nothing was wrong, the man's expression was heavy as he brought her to the sofa. He tossed the hangover medicine in his hand aside and reached out to undo her rain-soaked bathrobe. However, Jean-Wan abruptly raised her hand to cover the collar of the bathrobe. She struggled for a moment. I'll wash myself when I want to. Haven't you already bought the hangover medicine? I'll drink it myself. Go. The man's hand paused on her collar for a moment. Jean-Wan did not look at the man's eyes and turn away to leave. However, her feet staggered and the man's long arm reached out to pull her back. Jean-Wan was slightly flustered because of the dampness on her body and the heavy bathrobe. She angrily raised her hand and used all her strength to push and hit him. However, even if she used all her strength, she would not be able to do much to this man. She raised her half-conscious eyes to glare at the man's ink-like, deep eyes. You'll shower yourself? You'll make your own hangover medicine? If you could do that, 3 years ago, you wouldn't have soaked in the hotel bathtub for 2 days and 2 nights and almost lost your little life. With that lesson in mind, I won't leave until I see you obediently clean yourself up. If you have a strength, why don't you hurry up and take a hot shower? Feeling the coldness on her body, the man furrowed his brows and directly untied the belt in the middle of her bathrobe. Jean-Wan frantically held onto the bathrobe that was about to fall open. When the man raised his hand to help her take it off, she struggled to lower her head to bite him. However, after a long while, she was unable to bite him. She was so angry that her eyes turned red. She angrily scolded, Mo Jingshin, you bastard, don't take off my clothes. You don't remember what I said that day, do you? The man's hands did not stop moving. As he touched her body, he felt that the originally cold temperature on her body was gradually turning hotter and hotter. He suspected that she had already developed a fever from the rain when she came back. However, Jean-Wan continued to hold onto his chest and refused to let go. Her mouth kept muttering indistinctly until she said hatefully, I said I don't love you anymore. I don't love you anymore. Mo Jingshin, you're not allowed to take off my clothes. I don't love you. Get lost. Before she could say anything worse, in the next second, the man abruptly pulled her to the front with great force. As she was about to continue scolding him with reddened eyes, he held the back of her head and kissed her. The cool, masculine scent that carried the dampness of the rainy night covered her lips. It was not a simple kiss like before. He directly pried open her lips and penetrated deep and heavy. Jinwan's brain, that had been numbed by alcohol, instantly stopped moving. She trembled in the man's embrace and bit him hard. She took the opportunity to struggle to say, "I don't you." Even the root of her tongue felt as though it was about to be seized. Jinwan's entire body trembled. She raised her leg to kick him, but the bathrobe was too heavy. Her feet were only indoor shoes and did not have any offensive power. Instead, the man's strong fingers locked onto her waist. It was as though he was about to squeeze her into his body. Just as Jinwan was about to bite him, he harshly took her lips and brought her back. She was heavily thrown onto the sofa dash. Chapter 591. He pressed her under his body, trapping her firmly like an invisible lock. Jinwan fell onto the sofa. Because she was lying under him, her eyes revealed some panic. Mo Jingshan was above her, ignoring all her struggles and kicks. He looked at her with his deep, ink-like eyes, and the flames of calmness were burning quietly. Under his gaze, Jinwan felt flustered. She quickly moved her eyes away, only to see the man's slender and well-defined fingers unbuttoning his shirt. His clothes had also been drenched by the rain, but they were still black. The collar gradually opened, and the man's Adam's apple rolled in front of her eyes. Jinwan's entire body tightened. "Say it again, you don't love me, in?" The man pressed her down with one hand and took off his clothes with the other. He didn't have the time to continue kissing her, but his voice and tone were so heavy that she could clearly feel that he was really provoked by her. Jinwan watched as the man's well-dressed shirt was unbuttoned. She wanted to move back, but her legs were pressed down by the man's knees. She pushed him hard, but to no avail. Seeing the man's chest becoming clearer and clearer in front of her eyes, she felt a loud bang in her head. Her bathrobe, which was soaked in water, was already open because the strings were undone. The man could easily take off her bathrobe. When he pressed her down, Jinwan raised her hand to block him. "Mo Jingshan, what do you mean? What are you doing?" The next moment, the man held her wrist and pressed her against the sofa. Mo Jingshan lowered his head, and his breath sprayed on her cheek. "You." Jinwan didn't react at first. When she finally understood what he meant, her eyes immediately turned red. However, before she could speak, the man's kiss fell again. This time, he didn't let her escape easily. Jinwan didn't know what he meant. She didn't know what he meant. Her hands and feet were restrained by the man at the same time. This kiss was not gentle at all, and because she kept trying to bite him, it was stained with the smell of blood. Mo Jingshan had always been too indulgent with her. When she refused, he didn't really force her. But at this moment, being pressed against the sofa by the man, Jinwan clearly felt that the man was using the most primitive physical force to suppress her. This kiss was full of invasion and plunder, and she couldn't stop trembling under him. "No, you..." Jinwan was still struggling, but the heavy bathrobe on her body had been taken off. She wasn't wearing any clothes at all. The man blocked her lips. Her hands were held against the back of the sofa by him, and his knees were pressed against her so that she couldn't move at all. His deep, scorching, conquering kiss moved down from her lips, down her neck, down to her collarbone. She had never seen him like this before, and he didn't. He didn't look as he usually did. The more she struggled and resisted, the more he wanted to suppress her. The more she struggled, the more he lost control. Whether it was his lips, hands, or the strength of his hands, he couldn't control them at all. They gradually became heavier, and the burning temperature of Jinwan's body made the blood of the man who was supposed to be sober gradually boil. He didn't have the slightest intention of letting her go. Jinwan was naked because the bathrobe had been thrown off the sofa by the man, but the man was still wearing everything except for his unbuttoned shirt. Her hands were held by the man, and her eyes were red with anger. She gritted her teeth and called out his name, "Mo Jingshan." The man's kiss fell on her lips again, stopping her from cursing. At the same time, he slowly bit her lips that had been kissed, red, and swollen. Jinwan's whole body was limp and trembling, and even the hands between their bodies softened. Even her hair was messily spread on the sofa. It was a kind of embarrassing and helpless feeling. "Mo Jingshan, I drank tonight, but I'm still sober. Don't take advantage of me." The man held her waist with one hand and supported himself by her side with the other. His dark and hot eyes stared at her unscrupulously. His thin lips moved slightly, and his voice was low, husky, and firm. "It's not sober or not. You're the one who knocked yourself against my gun. I'm not taking advantage of you. Today, I'm going to take you." Jean Wan stared at him in disbelief. Her breath caught in her throat because of his words. She hurriedly pushed him with all her might, but the man easily restrained her hands with one hand and pressed her into the sofa with even more force. Jean Wan panicked. However, before she could finish her words, the man bent down to kiss her again, from her lips to her cheeks, to the sensitive area by her ear, and finally sucked on her earlobe. Under this action, Jean Wan's legs were still pressed down. She wanted to move, wanted to struggle, wanted to hit him with something, but could not do as she wished. She even wanted to say that she did not love him, but every time she opened her mouth, the man would cover it. She could not even say a complete word. When Jean Wan's hands were pulled down by him again, her expression faltered. Her whole body trembled uncontrollably under the man's deep, yearning gaze. "You can't make it through tonight. Even a cold shower is useless. We get in?" The man's breath landed by her ear, and his voice was too low and husky. His words were telling her that no matter what, he would not give her any room to retreat tonight. However, it was clear that Jean Wan did not have any room to escape. She suddenly regretted drinking so much. Right now, her whole body was weak, and she did not even have the chance to resist. After not doing it for more than 3 years, Jean Wan's heart was slightly empty and lost. She remembered that 3 years ago, this man had pressed her against the door of that ward in Los Angeles, saying that he was going to stab her heart with knife after knife. She remembered that in her first year in London, she had tasted the taste of failure and stayed up all night, working like a machine every day. She remembered that Annie Chun had said that after she signed the divorce papers, he had smashed up the entire Yew Garden. She raised her hand to scratch the man's face harshly, but the moment she raised her hand, he caught her wrist. The man's thin lips pressed against her ear, and his voice was heavy and husky as he said, "Right now, any movement of yours will agitate me to the point of losing my mind. If you don't want to be hurt by me, be good and don't move." Jean Wan bit down harshly on her lips that had turned white. This man was actually threatening her. Chapter 592. The crisp sound of his belt unbuckling could be heard. Jean Wan abruptly raised her upper body to escape, but the man pressed her back onto the sofa. Even at this moment, she still refused to yield. However, under the man's control, under the control of a man who understood her too well, once she fell into his hands, there was no way for her to resist at all. Taking advantage of the moment, he released her leg. Jean Wan raised her leg to kick him. However, before she could kick him, her ankle was abruptly caught by him. After being separated for more than 3 years, this woman's body felt as though it was her first time. Jean Wan's face paled from the pain. She abruptly turned around and harshly bit down on the man's arm. Mo Jingshin was not much better off. Earlier on, she was already showing signs of having a fever. Her body was already burning hot. The man could not help but raise his hand to hold her chin. He lowered his head to kiss her lips. However, Jean Wan continued to struggle violently. She did not cooperate at all. Her limbs were not under her control. She was completely under the control of the alcohol. She wanted to hit him, push him away, and did not want him to be satisfied. Why did he have the right to do whatever he wanted? Why did he think it was for her sake that he could hide everything and push her away so cruelly? In the end, he only casually said it was all for her. Why was he able to control everything so calmly? Usually, no matter how forceful Mo Jingshin was at the very least, he had always considered her feelings and never forced her. Even before their divorce, he had never forced her. But now, what did this count as? He actually dared to force himself on her. This bastard. Scum. He had nothing to do with being a gentleman. He was a bastard. The battle was intense. In the past few years in England, Jean Wan had been wearing some skincare products to prevent her skin from turning red and swollen due to her acclimatization. 3 years of taking care of her skin had made her skin even more tender, delicate, and white, and even more sensitive. If he used a little more force, it was easy to leave marks on her body. Looking at the uneven marks on her body, it was as though Mo Jingshen was bewitched and could not stop. He patiently kissed every inch of her body. The night fell. If Jinwan was said to be a hedgehog whose thorns had been forcefully plucked, then Mo Jingshen was transformed from a dignified CEO boss into a bandit. She couldn't even remember if she had said a complete sentence last night. She only had a vague impression of a few sentences. She vaguely remembered that the man's breathing was clearly erratic, but his low and calm voice was close to her ear, asking again and again, "I'm asking you, do you still love me?" As long as he didn't get the answer he wanted, he would find another way to torment her. Until Jinwan gave a satisfactory answer, almost sobbing, "Dawn." Jinwan couldn't get up at all. She couldn't even get up. The little woman's hair was a mess. Her face, which was pale from being bullied last night, was now extremely red. She hadn't woken up since dawn and had been in a deep sleep. The only thing he could touch was the scalding heat on her body and forehead. Last night, Jinwan had been burning hot. It was so hot that Mo Jingshin had almost lost his rationality. He was immersed in the heat and ignored her hoarse cries. It was only when he held the thermometer he had requested from the hotel staff and saw that it showed 39.6 degrees that he finally regained his composure. Jinwan was still sleeping. His fingers brushed aside the hair on her face, revealing her abnormally red face. Half of her face was buried in the pillow, and she looked miserable and helpless. After sleeping for an entire day, she finally showed signs of waking up. When she opened her eyes, even though she was still lying on the bed, she still felt as though the entire world was spinning. She furrowed her brows in discomfort and closed her eyes again, trying to ease the dizzying feeling. Chapter 593. Her body felt heavy, and her entire body was aching. She could not muster up any strength, but her body felt refreshed, unlike last night when she was sweating profusely under the man's body and tossing the bed into a mess. She must have washed her body thoroughly. Even her hair was clean and fluffy, smelling like shampoo. When she opened her eyes, she found herself still in the hotel room. At the same time, she felt a faint discomfort and soreness in her lower body. She did not even need to think to know that everything that happened last night was real. Jinwan opened her eyes and looked at the ceiling and overhead lights. She was still in a daze and did not understand how things had developed to this point. She turned to look at the sky outside the window. It was getting dark. It was clear that she had missed her flight back to High City. However, she was still in a daze. She raised her hand to touch her forehead, only to feel a rectangular patch. She peeled it off and looked at it. She then closed her eyes to ease the dizziness in her head. She cursed Mo Jingshun hundreds of times in her heart. He clearly knew that she had a fever last night, but he actually did it for an entire night. Based on the situation last night, if it weren't for the fact that she had paid attention to training her body and persisted in exercising over the past few years, which improved her constitution, she would have probably died from overindulgence last night. He even used this kind of patch. Furthermore, she felt weak even when she thought about it. It was easy to guess that her fever was not low. In addition, she had a hangover from last night. No wonder she felt so uncomfortable, as though she was suffering from vertigo. Jinwan was still lying on the bed, fighting against her spinning head. However, after struggling for a long time, she still could not sit up. Even the slightest movement of her head made her feel as though the world was about to turn upside down. The hangover was really uncomfortable. She turned her head to look at the hangover medicine in the corner of the sofa. Mo Jingshin knew that she would feel uncomfortable when she woke up, so he bought this for her. However, in the end, not only did she not drink it, it even turned into she put the heat relief back on her head, put her hand down, and turned her head. Suddenly, the man's handsome face and tall figure appeared in her line of sight. She saw that Mo Jingshin was still in her room. Although he was wearing clothes, the clear scratches on the man's neck caused her eyes to stare. Those were the scratches she had left on his body last night when she cried until her voice was hoarse. Jin-won immediately sat up, but her movement was too abrupt. Before she could glare at the man, she abruptly fell back. Although her head did not hurt when it hit the pillow, the dizziness made her moan uncomfortably. She raised her hand to her head and moaned in pain. The man was holding a glass in his hand. Seeing that she had fallen back onto the pillow, he walked over and said in a low voice, "Lie down and don't move. Take the antipyretic when you wake up." Jin-won glanced at the glass of water and medicine that the man had placed on the bedside table. Before she could speak, the man had already reached out to help her up. He placed a soft pillow behind her back so that it would be easier for her to drink the medicine. Jin-won did not have much strength. Seeing the man's attitude, as though nothing had happened, her eyes almost turned red from anger. Even the events of last night rushed into her mind. Her heart was filled with anger. Without even half a second of hesitation, she sat up and pushed the man who was about to feed her water down the bed. How could she have a strength? Earlier, she had not been able to sit properly. Mo Jingshin was not pushed off the bed, but the glass of water in his hand was almost knocked over by her. He steadied the glass and placed it by the bedside. At the same time, he held her wrist with his other hand. When Jin-won almost fell head first onto the bed, he hugged her. "You've had a fever for an entire day and night. Don't toss about. Obediently take your medicine." Jin-won raised her head to look at his lazy and calm appearance. She adjusted her beard several times before spitting out a complete sentence. Her voice was cold and stifled. "So you know that I've had a fever for an entire day and night? Then why didn't you stop last night? I begged you so much, but you wouldn't stop. Do you want me to die?" The man still sat down by her bedside. Under her icy gaze, he caressed her burning face as though comforting her. There was a smile on his lips as he warmly said, "The more you beg me, the more I can't control myself. I'm sorry. In the future, I'll be gentler." "You're still thinking about the future?" Jin-won immediately glared at him coldly. After a night of indulgence, Jin-won was completely naked. When she saw that Mo Jingshin was dressed neatly, her anger grew. However, no matter how she tossed and turned, the only word she could think of was to scold him. In the future? There would definitely be no future. She wanted to hit him, but the man had already placed the medicine in her mouth. As the bitterness spread in her mouth, he brought the glass of water to her lips. Jin-won had no choice but to quickly drink the water to swallow the medicine. However, her throat was dry and painful. After drinking so much water, she choked for a moment. The moment she coughed, the man placed his hand on her back and gently patted it. Yet, even with such patience and gentleness, it could not erase his violent actions last night. Last night's battle was intense. The clothes he wore on the sofa could no longer be worn. This set of clothes must have been sent over. Seeing that he was dressed and no longer had the unstoppable manner he used to bully her, Jin-won coughed several times and turned her head to continue coughing. She did not even want to look at him. "When the sun rose, I called the doctor over and gave you some medicine. You were drenched in the autumn rain right after taking a hot shower. The cold air invaded your body too quickly, causing your fever to persist. Take your medicine on time and rest well. Once your fever completely subsides, you'll be fine." The man's hand was still pressed against her back. When Jin-won coughed again, he patted her again. Jin-won wanted to push him away and get off the bed. However, the man's actions appeared patient and gentle, yet he kept her firmly on the bed. He had no intention of letting her get off the bed so easily. "Are you sure you can get off the bed in your current state?" The man's tone was calm, yet his words seemed to carry a double meaning. Her current state? This reminded her of something. Jin-won pushed him again, but to no avail. In the end, she could only struggle with the quilt beside her. She pulled the quilt up and covered herself with it, covering her naked body and the red and purple marks on her body. Seeing that she still had the energy to argue with him, even though her face was flushed red from the fever, Mo Jingshin chuckled softly. "Lie down properly. I'll help you cover it." Jin-won tugged at a corner of the blanket, angrily saying, "There's no need." Chapter 594. However, the man suddenly let go of her and she immediately fell onto the bed as soon as she pulled the quilt back. The moment she lay back, she turned her head with a jerk, only to see the man's thin lips slightly curved as if laughing at her for overestimating herself. She was so angry that she rolled her eyes and covered her head with the blanket. "I just took the medicine. Wait a minute. Someone will bring food over in a while. If you don't have the strength, I'll feed you. With your fever like this, you need to have the most basic strength to compete with me. You should know what's best for yourself." The man's voice came from outside the quilt. Jinwon didn't speak under the quilt, but she did have a serious fever. She didn't sweat even after being under the quilt for so long. If she did sweat, her fever would probably go down. After a while, when she felt the man sitting by the bed get up and leave, she slowly pulled the quilt back down. She stared at the darkened sky outside the window and confirmed that she had really slept the whole day. At this time, she really didn't have the strength or energy to think about anything. Since she had missed the flight back to High City, even if she wanted to go to the airport now, it was likely that she couldn't book a ticket for the same day. Besides, she really couldn't get up now. She had just been tortured last night. There was no need to make things difficult for herself now. She opened her eyes to look at the sky outside the window for a while, gradually closed her eyes, and accidentally fell asleep. Half an hour later, Mo Jingshin received the dinner delivered by the hotel staff outside. When he brought it in, he saw that the little woman was still sleeping on the bed, curled up into a ball under the quilt, as if she was particularly insecure. She was curled up into a ball again. She didn't wear anything and instinctively wrapped herself tightly in the quilt. Before dawn, he carried her to take a shower. He originally wanted to help her put on clothes, but she was tired and confused. After putting him on the bed, she cried and struggled to stop him from touching her. In the end, she wrapped herself in the quilt and shrunk to the corner of the bed. Motionless, she closed her eyes and sobbed as she fell asleep. Seeing her pitiful appearance, he gave up and didn't insist on helping her put on clothes. Although he couldn't bear to wake her up now, she hadn't eaten anything all day. When she was unconscious during the day, he had tried his best to feed her the medicine. If she didn't eat anything now, the medicine would be enough to make her stomach feel uncomfortable, not to mention that she had consumed so much energy last night under the condition of a fever. "Eat before you sleep." Mo Jingshin pulled her out of the quilt. Jinwon was in a daze when the man suddenly dug her out of bed. She instinctively frowned, and before she opened her eyes, she heard the man ask her in a low, husky voice, "Vegetarian dumplings, tofu soup, vegetable porridge, and a few side dishes. What do you want to eat?" Jinwon opened her eyes to see the man's face so close to hers. Realizing that she was being held by him, she immediately scrunched up her feverishly flushed face. She turned her head away to look at the tray and the things on it on the table not far away. She closed her eyes and said in a hoarse voice, "I want to eat teriyaki chicken, Manchu-Han Imperial Feast, sushi pizza, barbecued pork dumplings, salmon." The man quietly listened to her. "You can eat after your fever subsides. Right now, you can only eat bland food." Hearing this, Jinwon lifted the quilt to cover her head. She said impatiently, "Then I won't eat." She then turned to lie down on the bed and leave the man's embrace. However, just as she was about to roll onto the bed, the man easily pulled her back and forced her to sit on the bed. "If you don't eat, do you plan to maintain this state when you wake up tomorrow morning? You can't even sit up?" Jinwon sat up with the man's help and immediately said angrily, "There's no taste in my mouth. I don't want to eat such bland food." The man nodded. Just as Jinwon was about to lie back on the bed, he leaned down and kissed her hot lips. Jinwon suddenly shivered and pushed him with all her strength. However, she only managed to push the man's lips away by a finger's length. She was about to argue with him angrily when the man lowered his head and kissed her again. Jinwon trembled for several seconds. The man held the back of her head and did not restrain himself despite her resistance. Instead, the kiss deepened. Their lips and tongues intertwined. Especially when she was sober and not drunk, she could easily recall the scenes from last night. Her scalp instantly turned numb. She had no strength to push him away. In the end, she was forced to raise her head to receive the man's kiss. Her fingers involuntarily tightened around the man's clothes. Just as she was in a daze, the man released the back of her head and stopped the kiss. Just as Jean-Wan was about to fall back weakly, he held her waist and held her in his arms. Jean-Wan had yet to react when the man casually said, still bland, Jean-Wan, I'll carry you over. Mo Jingshin, I'm not wearing any clothes. Just as the man's hand was about to pull her out of the blanket, Jean-Wan hurriedly tightened her grip on the blanket. The man paused for a moment before getting up to retrieve a loose and easy-to-wear blouse from the suitcase she had left in the room. He came back and helped her put it on. Only then did she release the quilt that she had been clutching tightly to. The man buttoned the blouse for her one by one and then carried her horizontally. When she was carried to the table where the dinner was placed, Mo Jingshin placed her on the sofa closest to him, asking, what do you want to eat? Jean-Wan did not speak. She only glanced at the dishes on the table before looking at the vegetable porridge and tofu soup. The man did not ask further and placed the two dishes she had been staring at in front of her. He originally wanted to hand her the cutlery, but when he saw her leaning against the sofa weakly as though she had no bones, he picked it up and scooped it up with a spoon, bringing it to her lips. Open your mouth. Jean-Wan originally did not want to cooperate, but she did need strength. She could not continue wasting time like this. Furthermore, Mo Jingshin had ignored her cries and begging last night and had been beastly. Right now, even if he were to serve her while she ate, it would not be too much. Thus, Jean-Wan opened her mouth and swallowed the vegetable porridge with a hint of vengeance. Her gaze was still cold and hateful as she stared at the man in front of her. Yet, when this man was serving her while she ate, he sat by her side with his back straight, elegant and stern. His cold-toned shirt was immaculate, and his movements were so natural that it made her feel as though she was a small animal he was personally feeding. Small animal. Chapter 595. Mo Jingshin did not expose the little woman's vengeful and angry thoughts. When she received the bowl and obediently lowered her head to eat, his lips curved slightly. His tone did not change as he said, eat, it's not hot anymore. Jean-Wan did not speak, lowering her head to focus on eating. After eating, before she could speak, the man had already carried her back to the bed. This kind of carrying, Jean-Wan's throat felt uncomfortable. She coughed and did not speak. She sat on the bed and remembered her phone. Mo Jingshin, bring my bag over. Hearing the woman's commanding tone, the man only took a deep look at her. He took the bag and handed it to her without a word. Jean-Wan unzipped it and took out her phone. She saw that there was only 4% battery left. She was about to charge it when she unlocked the phone and saw several missed calls. Some of them were from the driver from last night. She had originally arranged for the driver to bring her back to the hotel, but in the end, she drank too much and was brought away by Mo Jingshin from the club. The driver had not been able to contact her. It was likely that after asking the others and learning that she had left, he left. She couldn't have caused him to wait outside for an entire night, right? As Jean-Wan pondered, she looked at the other missed calls. They were all from her colleagues. Aside from those she knew, only the company would call her. After hurriedly returning a few calls to her colleagues and the driver, Jean-Wan raised her hand to touch her head. It seemed like it was still burning, and there were no signs of perspiration. Finally, when she returned the call to Xiao Ba's nagging voice could be heard from the phone. Boss, why did you only receive news now? From this morning until now, you haven't replied to any of my calls or WeChat messages. You've really made me anxious. If I had known, I wouldn't have let you go to Jing City alone. I would have been more at ease if I followed you. Jean-Wan lowered her eyes and calmly replied, What's wrong? Why are there so many urgent matters? Actually, it's not that urgent. It's just that Mr. Zan came over from London. It's been several months since our company moved back to the country, but Mr. Zan hasn't come over to take a look. This time, he came to discuss business and dropped by High City, but you weren't here. He just dropped by High City to take a look? Or did he specially come to find me? It should be along the way, but didn't you always say that Mr. Zand is your master? When we first went to London, he was the one who took you with him. I thought you'd feel sorry for missing out on his trip to Sea City. What's there to feel pity about? I haven't seen him look for me many times in the past 2 years in London. He has invested in many companies under his name and personally led them. He is my teacher, but his students are all over the world. What's more, when I wanted to look for him, he was wandering around in other countries and had no time to deal with me. Now, he probably has some business to discuss in C City, so he came to see me. If he can't see me, then so be it. I don't think he will stay for long. You were right. After learning that you weren't in C City, Mr. Zand left not long after. He didn't tell us to pass your message. It seems like he was just passing by. Jean Wan chuckled. This kind of busy person who flies all over the world, if he doesn't have a goal, he basically doesn't have time to sit around. I think he saw that MN Group has officially moved back to the country and wants to discuss some cooperation with me in the country. Then you don't plan on working with Mr. Zand anymore. It depends on his sincerity. If he really wants to talk, he will call me later or come to High City to look for me, Jean Wan said mildly. Jean Wan said indifferently and looked up to see that Mo Jingshan was still looking at her, as if he was simply judging her attitude toward the company and her words and actions from the conversation she had on the phone. After speaking a few more words with Xiao Ba, she hung up. At the same time, she was about to charge her phone, but her charging cable was by the sofa. She directly handed her phone to Mo Jingshan. "Help me charge it." Her tone was still arrogant and bossy. The man took another look at her matter-of-fact attitude and accepted it. He turned to help her charge it, and at the same time, lifted his lips to speak mildly. Mr. Zand is an excellent corporate architect and financial analyst in England. In recent years, under his guidance, there have been many successful companies that have gradually entered the business circle. Your company is one of them. However, it's clear that MN Group is the only Chinese company that he has supported. You haven't let him down. In his eyes, you have a lot of potential. If he still wants to cooperate with you in the future, just accept it. After Mo Jingshan finished speaking, the air suddenly fell into a strange silence. Jean Wan sat on the bed and was about to lift the blanket to cover her legs when she suddenly paused. Her gaze shifted to the man who had just placed her phone on the table along with the charging cable. She watched his tall and straight back as he straightened up. 3 years ago, Mr. Zand had visited High City and suddenly extended an olive branch to her studio. He said that many of her business concepts, ideas, as well as her foresight towards property and other industries were very optimistic. After that, he had a long discussion with her, saying that he would help her remodel her studio and that he could help her build a business empire. At the time, Jean Wan felt that this person was just boasting and did not pay much attention to him. Later on, when her heart was like dead ashes and she decided to leave, she did not know what she was thinking. She suddenly thought of Mr. Zand and decided to give a try in London. At the time, she only thought that another business partner had introduced her to Mr. Zand. She had never thought otherwise. For someone of Mr. Zand's status, he was someone who had reached the acme of perfection in the eyes of many new companies. How could he possibly favor a small studio like hers? Did you arrange for Mr. Zand to come over? The matter of him bringing me to England was also arranged by you long ago? Jean Wan abruptly asked. The man saw that she was about to lie down in that light-colored smock. The smock was made of linen, so it wasn't comfortable to lie down and sleep in it. He casually went to her suitcase to help her find her pajamas. At the same time, he said faintly, "This kind of corporate creator who flies around Tian'an High City would obediently accompany you for a year. Is it hard to guess the reason behind this?" Jean Wan. Chapter 596. Thus, whether it was helping her or watching her grow up when she encountered difficulties, but when she needed support, he invested a sum of money in her. Although he appeared to be a very realistic and cold-blooded person, he had only done so to train her. Thus, from the beginning until now, every step she had taken in the past 3 years had been within Mo Jingshan's plans. There was not a single mistake. So, Mr. Zand, her so-called teacher, the person who helped her build the MN Group, had been arranged by her side by Mo Jingshan's side? Jean Wan only felt that a certain understanding was about to collapse from her mind. Some things that had been confusing her seemed to gradually become clear in her mind. Her lips moved before she asked in disbelief. "So, In the past 3 years, you know everything that happened to me in England? The man brought out her pajamas and came over to help her change into them. Jinwan did not have the strength to struggle. In any case, struggling was useless. She allowed the man to take off her blouse and help her put on her pajamas. At the same time, he tucked her shoulder-length hair out to prevent it from being uncomfortable in the pajamas. Jinwan raised her chin, still looking at the man's perfectly curved jaw. "Mo Jingshan, explain it to me clearly." The man looked at her, his hand still resting on the end of her hair. His long, slender fingers moved through her hair. "If I could really control many things, I wouldn't have to force you to divorce and force you to leave with a cold heart to solve all of this. There are always things that I can't fight against myself." Jinwan looked at him and did not speak. The man's hand landed on her back, seemingly comforting her gently and confirming the thoughts in her heart. His voice was quiet and indifferent. "During the 3 years you were in London, although it was my arrangement, I didn't interfere in anything, nor did I try to find out. The only thing I did was to hand you over to someone who I could let go of in peace before you left." Jinwan looked at the man's handsome and deep face. For a moment, she did not know how to describe such a man. He could quietly devise strategies under the seemingly supercilious state. He could have strong self-control and motivation to save her life. He could also make her believe that he really didn't love her when he should have made her believe that he really didn't love her. Now, when he wanted to get her back, he made her realize that this man's thoughts were deeper than the sea. It turned out that there were so many things she didn't know about him. It seemed that from the beginning, she did not know anything. She could be willful. She could act recklessly. She could take revenge because of hatred. She could grow up. She could do whatever she wanted. She thought she was already very successful, but when she did not know anything, he knew everything. Jinwan pursed her lips and did not speak for a long time. Seeing her dark eyes, the man placed his hand on her forehead and then on her neck. "It's still very hot. When you were unconscious, your temperature only dropped to 38.7 degrees. Now, I'm afraid it's still not lower than 38 degrees. Take your temperature again. If it still doesn't drop, I'll find a way to lower your temperature." With that, the man moved his hand away from her neck. However, Jinwan sat motionless on the bed, staring blankly at the buttons on his chest, and said hoarsely, "Mo Jingshan." Hearing the emotion in her voice, Mo Jingshan took a look at her. He did not respond, but he did not walk away either. Jinwan slowly raised her eyes. Her eyes were red, and tears were rolling in them. After a long time, she said, "You're too scary." The man narrowed his eyes at her complicated emotions. Before he spoke, Jinwan suddenly grabbed the pillow on the bed and slammed it against him. She did not scold him anymore, but bit her lip hard and slammed the pillow against his face, chest, and shoulders. If she really wanted to hit him, she wouldn't have used the pillow, but she used it. Obviously, she needed to vent her anger, but she didn't want to hit him too hard. Mo Jingshan stood by the bed and did not move, allowing her to attack him with the pillow. He allowed her eyes to turn redder and redder, and her tears to fall more and more fiercely. It was hard to tell whether her eyes were filled with love or hate. Perhaps they're both. She loved everything he had done for her, loved him from the beginning to the present, and hated his strong, calm, and terrifying self-control. She hated him for dragging her from heaven to hell as if nothing had happened when she lost her child. People were most afraid of love and hate, but she had experienced it. People were most afraid of living for too long only to fall for the same person. But she had experienced it too. She was tired from hitting him, but she still forcefully threw the pillow at him. The sturdy white pillow in the hotel was almost deformed by her hands. She didn't know whether she used more strength to hit him or to pinch the pillow. She only knew that she had nowhere to express her feelings. If she didn't vent them, she would really explode. Jinwan, seeing that she was tired, Mo Jingshan lowered his eyes to look at the woman's red eyes and messy hair, calling her name in a low voice. Jinwan didn't seem to hear him, but she seemed to hear him because she suddenly increased her strength and slammed the pillow against his face. The man abruptly tugged the pillow that she had been clenching tightly against and reached out to pull her into his arms. Jean Wan's hands were empty, and without warning, she hit his chin, but she didn't even stop. She struggled with all her might in his arms, punching and kicking. Her hands kept hitting his neck, his shoulders, his chin, and even his face. Although her manicured nails didn't scratch his face, they still left several red marks on the side of the man's face. Her tears soaked the front of his shirt, and Mo Jingshan asked her to calm down several times, but she didn't seem to hear him and continued to slap him. The man abruptly lowered his head and kissed her tear-stained and salty lips. He pressed her harshly against the bed, suppressing her body that had been moving non-stop. He locked her in place with absolute strength until she gradually fell limp under him. She stopped moving but stared at him with reddened eyes filled with resentment. The man finally sighed softly against her lips and kissed her cheeks, eyes, kissing away the salty wetness on her face. "All right, I only ate a few mouthfuls. If you keep tormenting me like this, it'll be digested in no time. If you're sick, you have to act like you're sick. After the fever goes down, I'll stand still and let you hit me." And the man's hand caressed her face, pushing aside the hair stuck to it. Chapter 597. Jean Wan raised her hand to hit his face again. This time, the man held her wrist, lowered his eyes, and pressed his body against hers, staring at her. "Look at you. Are you going to use all your energy and strength to hit me for the rest of your life?" The man's voice was light and indifferent, without the slightest sense of irritation like hers. It was as if he was simply asking her what she wanted to eat tomorrow. Jean Wan's lips trembled in anger, but she could not speak. After a long time, she could only squeeze out a few words. "You're too scary." Mo Jingshan slightly curved his lips. "I'll take that as a compliment." She turned her head away abruptly, refusing to look at the man's infuriating smile. She never expected that everything she had experienced in the past 3 years, including her struggles, changes, and growth, was all under his control. She thought she had already soared, but it turned out that he was the one who held her back. Jean Wan wriggled in his arms again. Her tears had dried up, but they were still red. Her fever had not subsided, and her cheeks were also red. She looked as if she was about to be cooked. The man gently touched her hair and rubbed it comfortingly. "All right, don't make trouble. I think you've used up most of your strength." He had guessed correctly. Jean Wan didn't know where the strength came from. She hit him crazily for a long time, but most of her strength was used on the pillow. At this moment, her whole body was sore and soft. She could not even lift her arms. She could only move her body faintly, but because their bodies were so close together, she could feel the changes in the man's lower body with every movement. When she felt that her lower abdomen was being rubbed by him, Jean Wan immediately glared at him fiercely. "Shameless, dirty bastard. I'm already like this, but you're still hard." The man was still thinking about how to coax her, but he was instantly amused by this woman's words. He looked at her deeply and rubbed her hair patiently. "I thought you knew my desire for you last night. It's been more than 3 years. Do you think it could be filled in one night?" Jean Wan was expressionless, but her eyes and face were red. Even if she was expressionless, she did not look so cold. In his eyes, she looked cute. The smile in the man's eyes grew wider. "You don't know how much restraint I had to use to endure it after having sex last night. If you hadn't fainted from the fever today, I would have used another method to make you lie in bed for a day and a night, crying until you couldn't find her voice." "Jean Wan," she frowned, "don't press down on me. Get up." The more he lay on top of her, the more she moved, the more dangerous she was. In her current state, she definitely couldn't take another round. "No more?" the man asked in a low voice. Jean Wan closed her eyes and turned away. "I don't have the strength." Her answer was ambiguous, but the gist of it was that if she still had the strength, she might do it again. The man smiled, patting her head as though he was playing with a child. He then released her and stood up. At the same time, he glanced at the hair and sweat on Jean Wan's forehead, saying, "It's not like all this was useless." At the very least, the sweat finally came out. Jinwan was startled. She raised her hand to touch her head. As expected, she was sweating. This meant that her fever would go down soon. Jinwan did not move anymore. She turned around on the bed and closed her eyes to rest. Seeing that she was sweating more and more, it seemed like her fever was really going to go down. Mo Jingshun turned to the bathroom to prepare a bath for her. Several minutes later, the man came out to see that Jinwan was still lying in the middle of the bed with her eyes closed. She was not using a pillow as a pillow and was lying there quietly. It was clear that she had not fallen asleep. You sweated for a while. After your fever goes down, go take a bath. The water is ready. Jinwan ignored Mo Jingshun's words and did not move from the bed. She was indeed not asleep. Earlier on, when Mo Jingshun was in the bathroom, she kept her eyes open to look out the window. When she heard him come out, she closed her eyes again. At this moment, she was sweating nonstop. The pajamas that the man had just forced her to change into were instantly soaked with sweat. He didn't know how serious her fever was for the whole day. She finally sweated, but in the end, she sweated so much. Mo Jingshun watched as the little woman lay there motionlessly, drenched in sweat. Mo Jingshun walked over, placing his hand on her sweaty forehead and touching her flushed face. Jinwan did not move, nor did she avoid his hand. She only opened her eyes to look out the window, refusing to look at him. Her temper was quite bad. Mo Jingshun asked softly, "Should I carry you to take a bath?" She still did not move. This time, she turned her face even further away. She did not even want to look at him from the corner of her eyes. The man casually picked up the electronic thermometer by the bedside and measured her temperature. As expected, after sweating, her temperature had dropped significantly. Right now, it was only 37.2 degrees. He placed the thermometer down, his long arms directly carrying the woman, who looked as though she had just been fished out of the water due to her sweat. Before Jinwan could struggle, the man had already carried her to the bedside. Furthermore, he did not mind her sweat at all. His hand gently patted her back through her damp pajamas. Even if you want to throw a tantrum, you have to choose the right time. Jinwan did not want to pay attention to him. She did not want to speak to him. Just looking at him made her angry. Seeing her uncooperative expression, Mo Jingshun did not let go of her. He unhurriedly placed her on his lap, encircling her in his embrace. At the same time, the man's low and heavy voice rang above Jinwan's head. "Tell me, what do I have to do to appease your anger?" Jinwan could not tell if she was angry or something else. It was just that there were many things that she could not immediately digest. But he had never told her any of this. He had always kept it a secret. It was as though her every conscious or unconscious decision and action were all predicted by him. Right now, she did not have the strength to struggle against him. However, being held in his arms, she raised her eyes to see the man's calm and indifferent expression. It was as though no matter what he did, he was always right. It was as though everything was within his expectations, including her every emotion. Right now, she was like an insensible little woman throwing a tantrum. Her hair stood on end in his arms. Mo Jingshun, have you ever thought about my feelings? Chapter 598. Right now, Jinwan's attitude toward him was exactly the same as that day when she coldly said she no longer loved him. It was as though he was dispensable and she did not care about anything. She had her own temper, but it was not big. She only harbored some thoughts of revenge and always wanted to stab a knife into his heart. However, it was rare to see her so angry when she threw the pillow at him. "I don't need you to accommodate me. Move your hand away." No matter what she said, he had no intention of letting go. Jinwan wanted to twist out of his arms, but she remembered that the man couldn't take any teasing right now. If she moved around in his arms like this, it would only do her no good. In the end, her expression turned ugly. "I'm all sweaty. Even if you don't dislike me, you still dislike me. Let me take a shower. You still have strength? I'll carry you over? No need. I can do it myself." Mo Jingshun lowered his gaze to look at her sweaty little face and then at her furrowed brows. In the end, he still released her. After Jinwan got off the bed, perhaps because her fever was no longer as bad, Although she had used up most of her strength, she did not feel as dizzy as before. She steadied herself and went straight into the bathroom. Amidst the rising steam in the bathroom, Jean-Wan raised her hand to scratch at her similarly sweaty hair. She glanced at the bathtub that Imo Jingshin had filled with water and bent down to sit by the bathtub. She stared at the water in a daze for a while. Finally, the man suddenly knocked on the bathroom door. His low voice was calm, yet somewhat warning. "I want you to go in and take a shower, not hide from me. If I don't hear anything for more than 5 minutes, I'll go in at any time." Jean-Wan removed her sweaty pajamas and threw them onto the washing rack by the side. She then entered the water and sat down in the bathtub. She did not have any strength, but she did not need to wash herself in this bathtub. She only needed to sit in it, and the jacuzzi that came with this kind of star hotel would have the function of taking a bath. The water pressure from all directions washed her body rhythmically. From time to time, some white bubbles would bubble up. Soon, the entire bathtub became like a bubble bath. Jean-Wan just lay motionless in the bathroom, letting herself be washed clean. She looked up at the light in the bathroom. In the end, the bath was so comfortable that she almost fell asleep. About 2 minutes after she closed her eyes, there was another knock on the bathroom door, and the man's deep voice rang out. "Don't sleep in there." Jean-Wan, did he install a surveillance camera in the bathroom? How could he predict everything she did? She had chosen this hotel to stay in. After Imo Jingshin brought her back from the club yesterday, this was the first time she had stayed here. It was unlikely that there would be any surveillance cameras. Jean-Wan's gaze instinctively scanned the bathroom once. She then changed the bathtub's water and washed for a while before getting up. However, when she lowered her head, she saw that even though she had bathed several times, the marks on her body were still very obvious. She really could not figure out how perverted Imo Jingshin was last night. From head to toe, he really kissed her all over without missing an inch, and it was while she was still unconscious from the fever. Jean-Wan pulled a long face and stepped out of the bathtub. With one foot in the bathroom slippers, she took a step forward with the other and reached out for the towel on the silver metal rack. However, her feet suddenly slipped and she abruptly fell to the ground with a thud. Thankfully, her reaction was fast. Instead of falling straight down, she twisted her body slightly and landed on her bottom. Almost at the moment when Jean-Wan gave a low cry of pain, the bathroom door was quickly opened from the outside by the man. As soon as Imo Jingshin entered the door, he saw Jean-Wan sitting on the ground naked with a pale face. She looked as if she had fallen on her, but the man quickly walked over and bent down to carry her up. However, Jean-Wan held her bottom with one hand and pointed upward with the other. "Towel! Give me a towel!" Imo Jingshin casually tugged down a towel and wrapped it around her body. In an instant, he helped her up. "How are you? Did you fall badly? How could you fall after taking a bath?" Jean-Wan also wanted to ask if she and Imo Jingshin had a mutual nemesis. Why did she not do so many embarrassing things in the past few years in London? Her days were peaceful, but the moment she was in front of him, she would either have a fever or fall. Was this man his nemesis? Earlier, there was too much foam in the bathtub, and it flowed out. "I didn't notice. I didn't expect the floor to be so slippery," Jean-Wan explained. Her hand was still held behind her. Her expression changed from one of anger to one of awkwardness and grievance. Seeing that she still had the mood to put on an expression, it was likely that her fall was not serious. Imo Jingshin carried her up, walked out of the bathroom, and placed her on the bed. The moment Jean-Wan's bottom touched the bed, she shifted back slightly and wrapped the towel that she had casually wrapped around her body. However, the towel was only so big. It could only cover her from her chest down, neck, collarbone, shoulders, and chest. The marks left by the man last night, as well as her pale, rosy skin from soaking in the bath for too long, were all exposed to the man's eyes. Jean-Wan was stared at by the man for a moment. She abruptly pointed at her luggage. "Help me bring another set of pajamas." The man glanced at the bathrobe she was wearing. "How many sets of pajamas did you bring over?" "2. Imo Jingshin immediately smiled. "The remaining set is the pink halter top nightgown." The moment Jinwan recalled the style of that nightgown, she immediately fell silent. Last time at Sheng Tang Hotel, he almost couldn't control himself when he saw her in her nightgown. If it weren't for her period, he would have eaten her up that night. But that day wasn't much better. Her hands were sore for a long time before they were relieved. From the way I see it, there's no difference whether you wear it or not. But it was still better than being wrapped in a towel that barely covered her thighs. Bring it. I want to wear it. Mo Jingshen did not say more. If she wanted to wear it, he would let her wear it. He continued to search for pajamas in her luggage without any complaints. Finally, he brought out the soft pink silk nightgown and brought it back to the bed. I'll help you wear it. I'll do it myself. Jinwan raised her hand. Mo Jingshen handed the nightgown to her. After receiving it, Jinwan lifted the blankets and changed into the nightgown. The man's dark eyes watched as the little woman hid under the blankets to change into the nightgown. When she put down the blankets, the pink halter top fell into his eyes. Chapter 599. Indeed, she might as well just lie on the bed with the blankets covering her. She was dressed like this and even exposed all the evidence he had left on her body last night. It was a complete challenge to the little bit of self-control he had left because of her illness. He handed the thermometer to her and turned to leave, saying, "Check the temperature again. If you don't have a fever, you don't need to take the medicine." Jinwan took it, measured it herself, and said, 37 degrees. The man grunted and didn't speak. He didn't even look at her again. At this moment, his cell phone rang. Jinwan took the opportunity when the man went to the window to answer the call to get out of bed. She picked up her cell phone that had been charged for a while and walked to the bed with it. She heard the man's indifferent tone when he answered the call. It seemed to be a call from a company in America. Judging from his indifferent tone, it was mostly related to Los Angeles. Only then did Jinwan remember that MN Group had moved back to China and only needed to go to London to deal with some matters. But Shine Group's headquarters was still in America. After all, High City was only a branch. Mo Jingshin would be back for a long time this time, but he would eventually return to Los Angeles, wouldn't he? Last time, he had casually mentioned it to Mr. Vince. Shine Group was a company with a deep foundation in America for decades. It couldn't be moved as easily as MN Group. That was where Shine Group's foundation was. After all, he couldn't stay in High City for too long. It was already dark. Jinwan leaned against the bed, but couldn't fall asleep. There was only one big bed in her room, and Mo Jingshin didn't seem to have any intention of leaving. He slept on this bed last night. Could it be that he planned to sleep here again tonight? Jinwan looked at her cell phone and glanced at the bathroom from time to time. Hearing the sound of water, she knew the man was taking a shower. When the bathroom door opened, she withdrew her gaze and continued to look at her cell phone. There was no need for her to ask. Not long after the shower, the man went straight to the bed. It was as if they were really a married couple who had never divorced. The moment Jinwan sank down on the bed, she glanced at the time and suddenly pursed her lips. "I'm hungry." The man didn't stop lifting the quilt. After moving closer to her, he glanced sideways at the little woman's expression, which was obviously looking for trouble. He didn't expose her. "What do you want to eat?" Jinwan had only eaten some porridge, which was digested quickly. It was already past 10 o'clock at night, almost 11 o'clock. It was not an exaggeration to say that she was hungry. "Noodles, please." Jinwan lowered her eyes and continued to look at her phone, not looking at him. "Since I can only eat bland food now, I can only eat noodles." The man took the phone. "I'll get someone to go to a nearby noodle shop to pack a bowl for you. I don't want to eat food cooked outside." "Then where do you eat?" "From a hotel." "I want to eat your cooking." The man did not speak. Jinwan paused and turned to see that he was looking down at her. She quickly looked away and continued to watch the movie on her phone. She said faintly, "Can I?" "Forget it then. If this is Sheng Tang Hotel, I can ask them to vacate a kitchen for me at any time, and I can cook noodles. Right now, you chose this hotel yourself. I'm not sure if their kitchen can be vacated right now." Mo Jingshun did not seem to have any intention of rejecting her. His tone was patient and gentle. Even if she was purposely making things difficult or sending him away, he did not have any objections. "Oh, then I won't eat." Jean Wan's tone remained mild, her eyes never leaving the phone. "In any case, I was just casually saying it. It's already so late. It's indeed not good to make such a fuss." The phone was currently playing a new movie by a famous director. The opening scene was a fight scene. After watching for a while, Jean Wan felt that it was a little messy and switched to another movie. The man's voice rang by her side again. "Do you really want to eat my cooking?" She did not even raise her eyelids. I don't have much of an appetite. The takeout noodles are too oily. No matter how good the taste is, I'm not used to it." The man did not speak anymore, but Jean Wan could feel that the man had directly lifted the covers and gotten off the bed. She watched as the bed returned to being the only one there. Her gaze finally shifted toward the man's back. She saw that he was going to change his clothes. Was he really going to cook noodles for her? In fact, she was just looking for a reason to not want him to sleep on her bed. But she was indeed a little hungry. It was impossible for Mo Jingshin not to see that she was purposely making things difficult for him and sending him away. However, as she watched the man change into his shirt and trousers, Jean Wan quickly withdrew her gaze and lowered her head to watch the movie on her phone. Her heart, however, was suspicious. This hotel was not as big as Sheng Tang Hotel, nor was it a hotel invested by Shine Group. It shouldn't be that easy to make them vacate the kitchen for him. However, the man did not take long to leave. The silence in the room formed a sharp contrast with the sound of the movie on her phone. Jean Wan suddenly felt like a childish child. Her way of venting was also very childish, but she could not control herself. She guessed that Mo Jingshin wouldn't be back for a while. She put down her phone, got out of bed, and searched for some skin cream in her suitcase. She then carefully applied the cream to the skin exposed by her nightgown and rubbed the ambiguous red and purple marks a few more times. She hoped that these marks could be removed as soon as possible. Otherwise, she couldn't wear long sleeves, long pants, and high-collared clothes at the beginning of autumn. Besides, High City wasn't as hot as Jing City, and it was still a little hot. It was impossible for her to not see anyone when she went back home. After rubbing for a long time until her skin turned red, she frowned and got up to go back to bed. Now her skin was really hard to leave marks with the slightest force. No wonder the man had been ravaging her body like a demon last night. Jean Wan went back to bed with a dark face, lifted the quilt, and lay down. She didn't care whether Mo Jingshen went out to buy or cook noodles for her. She just picked up her cell phone and continued to watch the movie so that she wouldn't be distracted by other things. All of a sudden, her phone vibrated in her hand. Jean Wan paused, turned off the movie, and opened WeChat to see Mo Jingshin asking her, "What flavor do you want to eat?" Jean Wan replied, "Do you have seafood ingredients? Seafood noodles are also good." Anyway, the longer it was cooked, the better. The man sent a voice message. His voice was low, soothing, and patient. "Your fever has just subsided. Don't eat seafood. Change to something else." Chapter 600. After that, there was no response. Jean Wan glanced at Mo Jingshin's profile picture and name again. Was he going to use her photo as his profile picture all the time? In fact, this photo was quite good. Although she was in the photo, it was not a vulgar selfie. Instead, it seemed to be a picture of the scenery outside the car, but the person sitting in the car was in it. At that time, Jean Wan was talking to him, so her expression was natural. When she spoke, she did not put on an angry face, and there was even a slight smile at the corner of her eyes. To be honest, it was quite natural and beautiful. After looking at it for a long time, she suddenly realized that she had become narcissistic when looking at Mo Jingshin's profile picture. She immediately exited WeChat and continued to watch the movie with a straight face. Before she finished watching half of the movie, Mo Jingshin had returned. When he came back, Jean Wan turned to see that the man was holding a bowl of steaming noodles in his hand, and it was a very big bowl. As if afraid that she would find fault with him and say that it was not enough, he cooked enough noodles for almost 2 people. Mo Jingshin put the noodles on the table and picked up another smaller bowl. He put the chopsticks aside, picked up some noodles, and put them into the smaller bowl. Then he turned to look at Jean Wan, who was still sitting on the bed. Didn't you say you wanted to eat noodles because you were hungry? Come here. Jean Wan still sat on the bed and said indifferently, I don't have the strength to get out of bed to eat. The man glanced at her. When Jean Wan met his eyes, she suddenly realized that he would carry her over again. When she was considering whether she should go over herself, the man picked up the bowl and chopsticks and came over. He sat on the bed and patiently picked up the noodles and fed them to her mouth. Eat. Jean Wan glanced at him and pursed her lips without opening her mouth. The man raised his elegant and deep brows. What? You asked me to cook noodles for you in the middle of the night. Now the noodles are cooked and fed to your mouth. Why don't you eat them? Do you want me to feed you mouth to mouth? Jean Wan looked at the noodles in his hand. How did you get them to empty the kitchen for you? The man's expression did not change. He patiently put the noodles back into the bowl and dipped them in the soup to maintain the texture of the noodles. Money makes the devil turn the millstone. It's just a kitchen. Jean Wan did not speak. All right. This was indeed the most direct method. She pursed her lips. Seeing that he had already brought the noodles to her mouth and had raised it for a long time, she finally opened her mouth and ate the noodles. It was delicious, even very. After taking a bite, she slowly chewed in her mouth. She could obviously swallow it directly, but she didn't swallow for a long time. Her slow appearance made the man raise his eyebrows. What's wrong? Did it not taste good? Against her conscience, Jean Wan replied, It's really not that good. The man snorted, ignoring her words, and fed her another mouthful. You have to eat whether it's delicious or not. Otherwise, you'll be hungry until tomorrow morning. I said earlier, I want to eat seafood noodles, Jean Wan said vaguely as she opened her mouth to eat the noodles. First, you can't eat seafood right now. You have to be sure that you won't have a fever tomorrow. You have to avoid food when you're sick. Secondly, how fresh do you think the seafood in the kitchen can be at this time? The freshest ones have been stored for at least 24 hours. The man looked indifferent. If you want to eat seafood, find an island to eat in a few days. There's no hurry. Who wanted to go to the island with him? Jean Wan lowered her head to eat, ignoring him. Actually, it was really delicious. How could Mo Jingshin not understand this little woman's duplicity? It was only because he had bullied her harshly in bed last night that she was already stubborn. Right now, she was even more stubborn and refused to give in easily. After all, he had bullied her to this extent. It was not wrong for her to be ordered around. If it's not enough, there's more, the man reminded. Jean Wan's movements of swallowing the noodles suddenly paused. Earlier, she clearly said that it didn't taste good. Yet, right now, she was eating happily. Every time he fed her a mouthful, she would eat it. With a few slurps, she finished half of the small bowl. She abruptly turned her face away. I'm not eating anymore. Aren't you hungry? How many mouthfuls have you eaten? I'm not eating anymore. Don't mess around. Finish the meal. It's rare for you to have an appetite. Eat more. Jean Wan shrunk back into the bed, covering her legs with the blanket. She picked up her phone, intending to continue watching. Mo Jingshan watched her for several seconds before placing down the bowl in his hand. He did not use much force, but his voice carried a hint of coldness. Jean Wan. He watched her, calmly calling her name. I know you have a temper right now. Last night, I didn't restrain myself, but I'm afraid I'm not the only reason for everything that happened last night. You were so drunk and ran into the rain. Your words and actions are unable to make me treat you objectively and rationally. Right now, I can give in and spoil you, but if you say you want to eat, I'll cook for you. Sure, I'll cook this noodles. No matter if it's delicious or not, you have to finish it for me. Don't make things difficult for your own stomach. Seeing that she was still staring at her phone, the man raised his hand and pinched her chin. However, he softened his voice slightly. Do you really plan on letting me feed you mouth to mouth? Before Jean Wan could speak, the man lowered his eyes to watch her. Your temper right now is really no different from before. Stubborn and hard. She was silent for a moment before glancing at him. Back then, didn't you tell me to stop wearing the mask of gentleness and understanding? I'm still the same as before. It's easy to change mountains and rivers, but it's hard to change a person's nature. You're right. I'm still the same. The Jinwan mask that I used to think over and over again in order to keep my marriage and you is gone. I'm me. Anyway, there's nothing to hide between us. You said I was pretending in front of you because I didn't want to divorce you, but now I'm living like I was in the past. You said I have a bad temper. Mo Jingshin. Do you think I'm a clay figurine that you can make round and flatten if you want me to be round and square if you want to be round? She said so much, but the man only chuckled lightly. He picked up the bowl again. Right now, you're not just having a bad temper. You're also using the words I once said to stab me. If I really wanted to hurt you, I'm afraid you could hold a knife to my neck and scream to kill me at any time. Jinwan glanced at him. She wouldn't scream to kill him. But if it weren't for this matter, if it weren't for the fact that he was doing this for her sake, she would definitely keep her distance from him and would never come to Jing City with him for the rest of her life. If worst came to worst, she would scram back to London. At most, they would never meet again. Chapter 601. After all, if she hid too far away, it would be hard for him to make a move. The man brought the noodles to her mouth again. Jinwan didn't eat. In fact, she really wasn't full, but she didn't want to see him so proud. This time, Mo Jingshin stretched out his arm to pull her out of the quilt, let her sit on his lap, and fed her again. If you don't eat, it'll get cold. It's fine if you torture me in the middle of the night, but do you really plan to starve until tomorrow morning? A woman's body was soft, and the temperature in the room was very comfortable. She was only wearing a negligee, which was very thin. If she sat on his lap, her body would rub against his cheek. And Juan originally wanted to get down from his arms, but after moving a few times, she clearly felt the man's reaction. She was shocked and couldn't believe it. Last night, this man pressed her so violently on the bed and in the bathroom for so long, but now he still had a reaction when he touched her. Glancing at her indescribable expression, Mo Jingshin calmly handed the bowl to her. Although the change in his lower body was very obvious, his handsome face was still calm and indifferent, but his voice was much lower and hoarse, revealing his patience. He stared at her. You continue to torture me until we don't have to sleep anymore. If you don't plan to eat this noodles, I don't mind cooking another bowl for you after I'm full. She wanted to eat noodles, but he said he wanted to eat. Of course, it couldn't be this bowl of noodles. Jinwan's face alternated between red and white. Of course, she was not threatened but angered. She abruptly raised her hand to take the noodles. As she picked up the noodles, she said coldly, Mo Jingshin, it seems that your life as an ascetic monk is really unpleasant. Haven't you always been very self-controlled? Why is it that your brain is full of these things like a worm? When you were in America and Shuyin wasn't married yet, you have a lot of women around you. When you're really hard, why don't you find a woman to solve your physiological problems? Mo Jingshin lowered his eyes to look at her. His thin lips curved into a faint smile. Seeing that the man didn't speak, Jinwan turned to look at him as she ate the noodles and glared at him. Has there really been a woman who wanted to climb into your bed? Her sarcastic words were on the tip of her tongue, but she saw him slightly nod. Do you think it's too little? Jinwan did not speak and lowered her head to eat the noodles. She found that there was a poached egg below and took a bite. The man's tone didn't change as he continued, but it's true that no one else has succeeded except for you. Jinwan's expression was cold. Do I need to crawl? Didn't I sleep with him legally before? Mo Jingshin chuckled lightly, his lips curving slightly. His voice was slightly lazy and heavy. It's legal. I'm used to sleeping with you. In front of me, other women are just pink skeletons. Just looking at them makes me lose my appetite. I don't feel anything, so they can't climb up. Jinwan quickly lowered her head to glance at the man's lower body that was clearly poking at her. She said with a straight face, Can you stop looking at me? Either hurry up and get down, or let me sit back on the bed. He kept pestering her like this, and even talked about climbing into bed. She didn't even feel comfortable eating noodles. Mo Jingshin looked at her awkward expression and smiled mildly. I'm afraid I won't be able to get down myself. Jinwan fiercely swallowed the remaining half of the egg. She abruptly turned around and almost bumped into the man's face. He leaned close to her, his breath landing on her ears. His voice seemed to carry an illusion of bewitchment. "You'll help me?" She directly stuffed the empty bowl into his hands. "Get another bowl." Mo Jingshen raised his brows slightly. His gaze landed on her stiff face, and he did not speak. Jin Wan felt that his gaze on her was filled with ill intentions. Her voice immediately became sharp. "Mo Jingshen, don't even think about it." The man looked at her in amusement. "Don't even think about it? What did I say?" "Jin Wan, I want to eat noodles." She turned her face away, wanting to get down from his body, but did not dare to move. Mo Jingshen held her waist with one hand. Seeing that she really wanted to eat more, he finally released her and went to the table to get another bowl for her. After Jin Wan's fever subsided, it did not rise again. That night, although Mo Jingshen did not do anything to her, it was already very late after eating noodles. Jin Wan had no reason to drive him back to Sheng Tang Hotel, so the man still stayed in her room and climbed onto her bed. Although nothing happened all night and Jin Wan placed a pillow in the middle of the bed, when she fell asleep, the man pulled her into his arms. In the morning, she opened her eyes in a daze and saw the man's face so close to hers. At first, Jin Wan thought it was a dream. When she woke up, the sky was already bright. She abruptly sat up on the bed, but the man beside her had already disappeared. She raised her hand and rubbed her head. It didn't hurt as much as it did yesterday, and her condition was much better. She took her phone and looked at the time. It was almost noon. There was a WeChat voice message on her phone. It was from Mo Jingshen. She found that since she gave him a WeChat account, the man was very diligent in using it. He said that he had an important meeting in Jing City this morning and asked her to rest in the hotel. He would be back in the afternoon. After Jin Wan woke up, she received several calls, most of which were from the company. In fact, she had finished a lot of work in Jing City, and she had met all the people she needed to meet. However, just after she received a call from a business partner who invited her to meet them in the afternoon. There were some things that she had planned to talk about after returning to High City. Jin Wan felt much better now, so she got up, cleaned up, washed, and changed clothes. When she took a shower, she saw that the marks on her body were still there. They looked very red yesterday, but today they were a little bruised. It would take at least several days for the marks to disappear. She stood in front of the mirror with a cold face and put on long-sleeve clothes. At the same time, she took a long time to deal with the marks on her neck with concealer. When she arrived at the appointed place, she learned that this Western restaurant was invested by the Rong family's catering company in Jing City. As soon as she heard that it was the Rong family's restaurant, Jin Wan looked at the business partner who had been waiting inside for a long time and suddenly felt that today's invitation was not so ordinary. It might be a trap, but since she had come and the business partner had seen her get out of the car and was waiting inside, she had no way out. Chapter 602. Sure enough, as soon as she entered the door, she saw the business partner who had contacted her was standing next to Rong Chung with a big smile on his face. She didn't know what they were talking about. Rong Chung, whom they had only met once or twice last time and didn't have a good impression of, stood there indifferently and looked directly at Jin Wan. As soon as she saw this person, Jin Wan thought of Rong Yan. She looked at the partner who had asked her to come and said with a smile, "I was wondering why CEO Zhao would invite me to finalize the cooperation project in one go today. It turns out that there is another reason. CEO G, don't think too much. It's just that CEO Rong and I have a good relationship. Recently, CEO Rong often mentions you. I feel that CEO Rong is interested in CEO G. I just want to do you a favor and help you get together." CEO Zhao smiled, and when he looked at Jin Wan, his eyes were a little ambiguous. Jin Wan smiled and looked indifferently at Rong Chung, who was standing there like a son of a rich family. "CEO Rong is interested in me? I'm afraid it's not impossible." "CEO Zhao, you're joking too much." CEO Zhao didn't expect that Jin Wan, who was usually good at talking in business, would suddenly speak so directly. He paused and seemed a little embarrassed. But Rong Chung said, "Why not? CEO G is so beautiful and so successful at such a young age in the business world. There must be a lot of men who admire you. It's natural for me to fall in love with you." President Zhao chimed in from his side. Yes, yes, yes. President Rong is the most straightforward. If you like her, then so be it. Men and women are just like that. Once they like each other, they can get together. It's not that complicated. Jinwan, CEO Zhao, you must be a fool. Rongcheng's eyes were so cold that they almost fell out. How could he see that he was interested in her? Jinwan just smiled and didn't speak. After all, this was a banquet at Hongmen. She would deal with it as it came. CEO Zhao, the friends I made an appointment with today are still waiting upstairs. Why don't you go and meet them first? After I finish talking with CEO G, I'll go upstairs to catch up with you. Rong Cheng turned his eyes to CEO Zhao. CEO Zhao immediately understood. Okay, CEO Rong, CEO G, take your time. This restaurant was not small. At first glance, she could tell that a casual Western meal here could cost more than 10,000 yuan. Jinwan turned to see that the samples of various ingredients displayed in front of her were also flown in from abroad. As expected, they were very expensive. CEO G, have a seat. Now that there was no one around to disturb them, the mysterious smile on Rongcheng's face became calm and cold. He motioned for Jinwan to sit down first, but his expression was not very polite. Jinwan didn't refuse. She sat down and said flatly, CEO Rong called me here because of CEO Zhao. It can't be as simple as having a meal. I don't have anything to talk about with people I don't know. Why don't you just tell me what you want? Don't waste our time. CEO G, I invite you here to have a meal with you. CEO Rong, as I want to talk with you. As possible. I as possible. With the Rong family's power and wealth, as well as the restaurant invested by the Rong Corporation's catering company, this should be one of the best Western restaurants in Jing City. CEO Rong is indeed very sincere in inviting me to such a place for dinner. Jinwan smiled faintly. Rong Cheng called the waiter over and casually ordered a few dishes. Most of them were the most expensive dishes in the restaurant. Jinwan had seen a steak from some Western country earlier, priced at 18,000 yuan. There were also several other expensive dishes. It was not that Jinwan had never eaten before, but it was her first time seeing someone ordering so arrogantly. Finally, Rong Cheng ordered a bottle of 1982 Lafite. When the waiter left with the menu, Rong Cheng played with the glass on the table with one hand and looked at Jinwan, who had been sitting quietly opposite him without any emotion. Although it's a bit tricky to investigate M.O. Jingshen's case, I've learned something from some friends in High City. You were married to M.O. Jingshen and divorced 3 years ago, right? Jinwan raised her eyebrows. Just tell me what you know. You don't have to ask me. If it weren't confirmed, CEO Rong wouldn't have invited me here to have a meal and drink Lafite, right? Rong Cheng smiled, but his smile didn't reach his eyes. Since CEO G doesn't want to talk to me for too long, I'll be frank. As far as I know, CEO G's relationship with the G family is not so clear. It seems that Ji Hongwon is not related to you by blood. After you married into the M.O. family, you divorced M.O. Jingshen less than a year ago. Then you stayed in London for the next 3 years and just returned to China a few months ago. CEO G, I think you are very talented in the business circle. As long as you have help, no matter whether you're the daughter of the G family or not, as long as you get better and better in the future, no one will mention your ordinary background again. As long as MN Group thrives in China, it won't be difficult for you to find a suitable man to marry. As for M.O. Jingshen, his voice became indifferent. My sister hasn't insisted on seeing him these days, but I think she is really sad about him. Since you haven't seen CEO M.O. for years, I'm afraid you and CEO M.O. are just lovers. After the divorce, you will be far away from each other, and I don't think you have a deep affection for each other. In this case, as long as you let go of M.O. Jingshen, the Rong family can do something to MN Group. Before Rong Cheng could finish his words, a figure suddenly walked down the spiral staircase of the restaurant. Since when did Boss Rong start to threaten people like this? This is not the young master of the Rong family I know. Hearing the voice of the man coming down, Jin Wan was speechless. When did this bastard Xiao Lui come to Beijing? Was he upstairs just now? Could it be that he was one of the people Rong Chang said were upstairs today? It was not surprising. There were only a few well-known families in China, such as the Mo family in High City, the Xiao family next door, and the Rong family in Beijing. It was not surprising that the heirs of these big families knew each other. Yes, they knew each other, but she didn't know what their relationship was. Rong Chang turned his eyes because of the voice, and so did Jin Wan, only to see Xiao Lui coming downstairs with a cold smile on his face. Chapter 603. Jin Wan did not take Rong Chang's words seriously. It was just that this Jing Chung family's young master wanted to stand up for his sister. But she didn't expect Xiao Lui to be here. She tilted her head and looked at the approaching man. Xiao Lui took a piece of cake from a passing waiter's plate and put it in front of Jin Wan. The food in this restaurant is really good, but I'm afraid it's not to your taste. You better take a few bites of the cake. Seeing it was the young master of the Xiao family, the waiter didn't dare to say anything and went back to fetch more cakes. Jin Wan looked at the cake in front of her and said gently and meaningfully, "I wonder why so many big shots have gathered in Beijing recently. Even CEO Xiao has come here." Xiao Lui, still with one hand in his trouser pocket, stood by the table and said with a smile, "Even a big shot like Mo Jingshan has been blown to Jing City, which shows how wonderful Jing City has been recently and how many profitable projects there are. It's not surprising that people from all walks of life have come here." "What? Only your Mo Jingshan can come here, but I can't come here to meet my friends?" Jin Wan smiled and pretended to be enthusiastic. "Not really." She pointed to the seat on the other side of the table. "CEO Xiao, if you don't mind sitting next to me, I'll ask someone to add another chair for you. Let's eat together." "Your Mo Jingshan?" Rong Cheng sat quietly on the other side, and his eyes fell on Xiao Lui's face again. In recent years, he had never heard of the Xiao family and the Ji family, and the Xiao family and the Mo family were neighbors. They were like two kings of a land. They were two different families, but why did Xiao Lui's words sound different? "No need to add another chair." Xiao Lui raised his handsome eyebrows and glanced at the sofa chair Jin Wan was sitting on. "Isn't your seat big enough? Can't you let me sit with you?" Before Jin Wan could speak, Xiao Lui had sat down on the sofa on her side, as if they were very familiar with each other. Without any gap, he sat next to her, so close as if they had known each other for a long time. Seeing this, Rong Chung took a look at Xiao Lui and didn't know what he meant. If the young master of the Xiao family had any romantic feelings for Jin Wan, he wouldn't have mentioned Mo Jingshan just now. Rong Chung had been in the business circle for many years and lived in Beijing, so he had a lot of contacts with the heirs of the big families in the country. However, although he didn't have much contact with Xiao Lui, he at least knew that Xiao Lui didn't have many women around him. It was said that Xiao Lui had pursued Shi Niange, the daughter of Shida Group, for many years but never got what he wanted. What kind of ability did this Jin Wan have? One Mo Jingshan wasn't enough, and now she even had Xiao Lui to support her. After sitting down with Xiao Lui, Jin Wan just glanced at him calmly, and Xiao Lui also glanced at her as if it was natural for them to sit together like this. Jin Wan didn't speak. She was not interested in the luxurious Western food that Rong Chung treated her to. Although the cake that Xiao Lui gave her was also from this restaurant, it was Xiao Lui's treat and had nothing to do with Rong Chung. She picked up the small fork and took a few bites of the cake. Seeing that Jin Wan didn't intend to avoid arousing suspicion, Rong Chung couldn't tell what kind of relationship she had with Xiao Lui. "CEO G." Rong Chung looked at her and said with a meaningful smile, "I didn't know that Imin Group and Ling Xiao Group have many connections." What he found out about Imin Group had something to do with the Ji family, the Mo family, or even London, but Ling Xiao Group didn't seem to be involved. "Not really, but we've met in High City, and CEO Xiao and I have had a few simple interactions in private." "CEO Rong, you don't have to be so extreme and deep. We're all friends. Isn't our relationship on the table?" Jin Wan took a sip of the cream on her fork, and the smile on her lips was extremely faint. Really? But it seems that CEO Zhao's relationship with you is not just on the table. For so many years, except for Miss Sure in High City, no woman can get within 1 meter of CEO Zhao. He is famous for not being interested in women. Rong Chung said and glanced at Xiao Lui with a smile. Has CEO Xiao changed recently? Xiao Lui sat next to Jin Wan. Except for handing her a cake, he didn't do anything but casually glanced at Jin Wan eating the cake. As soon as Rong Chung said this, Jin Wan saw that Xiao Lui didn't want to say more, and a waiter brought the food over. Although he didn't treat people coldly like Mo Jingshin, he didn't look at people directly, and he didn't even look at Rong Chung. Rong Chung seemed to be more restrained when he spoke to Xiao Lui and was not as arrogant and condescending as before. Xiao Lui picked up the cup of Americano the waiter put in front of Jin Wan and took a sip. Jin Wan turned to look at him. This is the coffee I ordered. Women should just drink cappuccino or mocha with sugar and milk. Why would you drink Americano? Don't you think it's bitter? Xiao Lui held the coffee cup, glanced at her, and snorted. Be careful. You'll have yellow teeth. Jin Wan, I've been relying on Americano when I'm sleepy at work these years, and now I'm used to drinking it. Xiao Lui looked at her white teeth and smiled. He still held her cup of coffee and said lightly, You should change your habits since you come back to China. Drink less coffee and more juice or water. Sooner or later, you'll get pregnant and have a baby. You should eat healthily and pay attention to your health. Otherwise, if you drink too much coffee and give birth to a little black hole for the Mo family, Grandfather Mo will probably die of anger. What was he talking about? Jin Wan's face turned livid, and she glared at him. Xiao Lui still didn't care and drank half of her coffee. She was about to speak when she saw from the corner of her eye that Rong Chung, who was sitting opposite, didn't look very good. Obviously, it was because of Xiao Lui's words. So, did Xiao Lui really come to support her? Was their relationship so close that when one party was in trouble, the other would come to help? They had only met a few times, okay? Chapter 604. Xiao Lui naturally sat by her side and chatted with her. Recently, there have been a lot of events in Beijing. All kinds of banquets and financial symposiums have gathered here. Many people are not qualified to come. Did Mo Jingshin bring you here? In fact, Jinwan didn't really want to mention Mo Jingshin. She was wearing a long-sleeved shirt and trousers and had been sitting under the air conditioner for fear that her sweat would ruin the concealer. If that happened, the marks on her neck would be exposed. At that time, even if she wanted to say that she had nothing to do with Mo Jingshin, she might not be able to explain herself. But it was Mo Jingshin's idea that she came to Beijing. She nodded. Seeing Jinwan nod, Xiao Lui raised his eyebrows and smiled, and Rong Cheng's face darkened. After all, MN Group has moved back to China. It's not bad to come to Beijing occasionally. If Mo Jingshin and I don't have time, you can ask CEO Rong for help. At this time, Xiao Lui turned his eyes to Rong Chung and said with a meaningful smile, President Rong is one of the most influential young men in the capital. Not to mention the Rong family in the capital, the Rong's group alone can compete with the major domestic companies. With his strength, it's easy for him to help you contact some partners in the capital or help you gain a foothold in the capital circle. Rong Chung glanced at Xiao Lui and heard Xiao Lui continue. President Rong, we've been friends for many years. If my sister comes to the capital again, I'll have to rely on you. Rong Chung raised his eyebrows. Sister? Why haven't I heard that you have a sister? What? Is CEO Ji your sworn sister? Jinwan also got goosebumps when she heard the word sister. Xiao Lui smiled naturally. Xiao Lui's smile couldn't be more natural. Sort of. Everyone in the circle knows that CEO Rong dotes on his sister. Your second miss has been taken care of by you since she was a child. It's rare for a loner like me to have a sister I want to take care of. Jinwan is stubborn, but in fact, she has a good character. My father likes her very much and always wants to invite her home for dinner. She doesn't want to cause misunderstandings, so she rarely talks about these things. Hearing Xiao Lui said his father also liked Jinwan, Rong Chung took a few more glances at Jinwan. Jinwan hadn't contacted Mr. Xiao Jinjuan since she met him last time. She didn't ask much, and he didn't say much, but in fact, many things were self-evident. Sister? Who's his sister? Rong Chung sneered and said, I didn't expect CEO Ji to have such a close relationship with the Xiao family. In this case, we don't need to be so distant anymore. In the future, Miss Ji, you can indeed come to Jing City more often. You are at a marriageable age, so you should let go of your old feelings. I will find more suitable men for you, so you won't feel wronged. Jinwan put down the little fork in her hand, smiled, and said in a lazy voice, CEO Rong, you've been concerned about my feelings in marriage again and again. How can I be distant? You're the boss of a listed company. Don't you think you're too idle to care about other people's affairs? Jinwan's words were not polite at all. Xiao Lui turned his head, looked at Jinwan's delicate and fair face, turned his eyes with a smile, and said lightly, Yes, CEO Rong really cares about your affairs. Is it possible that CEO Rong is going to start a marriage agency business? I advise you to stop. After all, it's an unpopular business. In this industry, people often shoot themselves in the foot. It's a thankless and unprofitable business. Don't do it. Rong Chung raised his eyebrows slightly, and the smile on his lips deepened and became colder. He thought Xiao Lui just couldn't bear to see Jinwan being wronged here, so he came to join in the fun. He didn't expect that the Xiao family's elder Xiao, who had never participated in any disputes in the circle, would be so straightforward. Jinwan seemed to have a strong presence in the Xiao family, and Jinwan's family background was unknown. If he put all these together, interesting. Rong Cheng's lips were full of smiles. Of course I can't do that. After all, no one knows whether the girl introduced to him is first-hand or second-hand. What if she's a divorced woman and she's married like a virgin? It's not easy to deal with her if she comes back to settle the score with me. He picked up the tissue under the plate on the table and wiped his hands. What's going on the second floor? Aren't there 2 tables playing cards? CEO Xiao, did you lose too much so you came out to take a walk? But you've been out for too long. Won't your superiors be impatient? Xiao Lui raised his dark eyes slightly, looked at Rong Chung who was about to eat, and gave a cold smile. He played with the coffee cup on the table with his well-defined fingers and gently tapped it. When he turned to look at Jinwan again, his eyes reflected Jinwan's equally calm and cold figure. Jinwan was born with a face that could enchant all living things. However, over the years, her brows had long been accustomed to revealing a reserved and restrained expression. She was so cold that it seemed as though she would not be affected by anyone's attacks. She was so noble and cold that it seemed as though she was unapproachable. Even if the other party was Rong Chung, she continued to eat the cake that Xiao Lui gave her and didn't touch the various Western dishes that gradually filled the table. Seeing Jinwan's expression didn't change at all, but he was a bit displeased by Xiao Lui's words and said those indecent words. Rong Cheng's eyes gradually became calm and indifferent. I don't think CEO Ji has an appetite. Since you're here, why don't we go to the second floor to play cards? In recent years, CEO Ji's business has been going smoothly. I reckon that his luck should be very smooth. If he goes to the poker table, he will probably be able to win millions of dollars in a few minutes. With that, Rong Chen got up and asked the waiter to go upstairs to inform those people that a friend downstairs wanted to join them. Jinwan drank the juice and ate the cake. Her gaze followed Rong Cheng's back. Seeing that he had gone upstairs first, she pursed her red lips into a cold smile and said unhurriedly, CEO Xiao, can I refuse this game of cards? Xiao Lui glanced at her. You're really good at making trouble. How could you provoke someone like Rong Chung? Chapter 605. Xiao Lui raised his eyebrows and said flatly, if Rong Yin knows that Mo Jingshan is married and only has you, and he even takes you with him to Beijing, she will understand and stop pestering him. Yes, Miss Rong didn't pester him, but her brother doesn't seem to want to let it go. It's not up to him to decide whether to let it go or not. It's possible that he doesn't like you. After all, he always tries his best to satisfy whatever his sister likes. Now his sister finally has a man she likes. I'm afraid Imo Jingshin won't even look her in the eye. Rong Chung won't let it go so easily. Jinwan glanced at the second floor. Rong Chung had gone up. She looked at Xiao Lui. Can I go up? Who are there? Will someone beat me up? Xiao Lui smiled. No one can beat you. As long as I'm here, no one dares to do anything to you. Just stay by my side, and I'll let you play cards. It's easy for you to win millions of yuan. Do all of you crown princes play such a big game together? Not bad. Xiao Lui smiled. Even Xiao Lui thought that she couldn't leave so easily now. Since Rong Chung had said so, if she turned around and left now, she would only avoid the storm and would only have more negative effects. Besides, although she wasn't good at playing cards, she wouldn't easily show her weakness. After all, the entertainment in London was not as luxurious as in China, but she wouldn't easily show her weakness. Jinwan got up and went up. Seeing her fearless look, Xiao Lui snorted, thinking that Jinwan's character of going up the mountain despite knowing there was a tiger was quite similar to that of the Xiao family. As soon as she went upstairs, the door of the innermost VIP room suddenly opened, and a woman in a tight black dress staggered out of it, reeking of alcohol. When she saw Jinwan, she only took a glance at Jinwan and then continued to walk out drunkenly. When Xiao Lui also came up, the woman's eyes lit up. Just as Jinwan was wondering if this private room was the one they mentioned, a woman's confession suddenly rang from behind her. Jinwan looked back only to see that the woman in the tight black dress threw herself into Xiao Lui's arms and said in a trembling voice, I like you. When I first saw you when I was 15, I fell in love with you. When I was a child, you said I was too old-fashioned and monotonous, and you didn't bother to invite me to eat, drink, play, or go anywhere. Now I've changed so much. Can you give me a chance? I really love you. This sudden confession was heard by Jinwan. She looked at Xiao Lui in surprise. The man's suit was about to be torn apart by the woman, but the man only had one hand in his trouser pocket. He looked indifferent, yet he seemed to have the gentleness of an acquaintance who grew up together. But Jinwan felt that Xiao Lui would refuse. This was because this man, who usually appeared cold and strange after his casual flirtation, was even colder than Imo Jingshin. Can you give me a chance? I've liked you for more than 10 years, and it's rare for me to pluck up the courage to say so much to you today, but just now you suddenly left without even giving me a chance to speak in the private room. The woman's confession was affectionate and persistent, but Xiao Lui didn't withdraw his hand from his trouser pocket. He took a step back unhurriedly, pushing the woman in his arms away by an arm's length. At the same time, he let go of his hand and didn't touch her again. With some distance between them, he paused and lifted his eyelids to look at the drunk and sexy woman in front of him, who no longer looked old-fashioned and monotonous. He faintly pursed his thin and cold lips. No matter if you were the simple little girl from back then or the way you are now, I don't like you. There's no need to waste too much time and persistence on me. I won't like you now, and I won't have any feelings for you even after 10 years, understand? The woman's shoulders immediately sank, and she asked unwillingly, Is that sure Niange worth pursuing for so long? For so many years, she has never responded to you. Everyone knows that she has been entangled with Qin's sighting for so many years, but you have never had a place in her heart. Why do you still? Xiao Lui's eyes turned cold. You've drunk too much and even talked too much? His voice was not high, and his eyes were coldly narrowed. He seemed to be careless, but the air around him was as cold as frost. The woman immediately stopped talking, but from Jinwan's point of view, she seemed to be crying. This world was always like this. Excellent men and women were always pursued, and those who didn't know how to refuse often got a seemingly romantic and touching love because of their soft-heartedness. But in the end, they found that the other party was not suitable for them. If they really didn't like him, they might as well refuse him from the beginning. Although it sounded cruel, it was true that she hadn't fallen in love for more than 10 years. How could she fall in love with someone just because she changed her mind? Just like Jinwan herself, in her previous life, when she was just reborn, she often restrained her temper and forced herself to change. But Imo Jingshin knew her too well. He knew what kind of person she was, whether she was proud and unattainable or gentle and considerate. In fact, she was still the same person. People just needed to live as they were and didn't need to deliberately wear a mask that made them too tired. Mo Jingshin had indeed helped her find her former self step by step. At least she wouldn't compromise for anyone or anything. At least she no longer wore such a heavy mask on her face, and she didn't need to carry so many burdens that she shouldn't carry. The woman was drunk. After crying for a while, she was helped into the room. Before entering the room, Jinwan turned to look at Xiao Lui. Although Xiao Lui was really cold and didn't give the woman any face, at least he didn't take advantage of her love to play with her, which showed that he was not a scumbag. The door of the private room in front of him was wide open. It was obvious that the wine had been drunk long ago. The sounds of playing cards and the sounds of men and women laughing and discussing something could be heard clearly from inside. Jinwan paused, thinking that this party was invited by Rong Chung. The people here must be close to the Rong family. Now she only had Xiao Lui to talk to, but she didn't know him very well. Was he reliable? As if seeing the hesitation in Jinwan's eyes, Xiao Lui came over and glanced at her indifferently. Since Rong Chung has investigated you and knows that you are supported by the Mo family, no one here dares to eat you. Dash. Chapter 606. Jinwan's pale face was very indifferent. I just don't want to cause unnecessary disputes and disasters. If I knew what was going to happen from the beginning, I wouldn't have come today. Just now, I faced Rong Chung alone downstairs, but this game of cards, is it really just a game of cards? Jinwan's face was cold. After a few seconds, the man burst into laughter. You're right. Although Rong Chung arranged today's party, it's only because there are a lot of people in the circle in the capital recently. The Rong family wants to use this opportunity to build relationships with all parties. Rong Chung just invited a lot of people on behalf of the Rong family. We'll have dinner, drink, and play cards. I guess he'll officially invite everyone to the Rong family's grandpa's birthday party. Jinwan looked inside again. So how big is the Rong family's birthday party? Xiao Lui rubbed his chin and smiled. I don't know how big the party is, but even the Xiao family and the Mo family have been invited. It must be a big party. Jinwan glanced at him. Will Mo Jingshin also come? I don't know. The invitation should be sent out, but I don't know whether Mo Jingshin will come or not. But since Rong Chung dared to invite you, I guess he must have guessed that Mo Jingshin won't come. Jinwan pursed her lips. Don't tell him whether he will come or not. Anyway, I don't want to be misunderstood by others. Xiao Lui said playfully, if you don't want to be misunderstood, don't do anything that will make people misunderstand you. Jinwan was a bit unhappy with his playful tone. What will make people misunderstand you? Xiao Lui smiled and suddenly scratched Jinwan's neck with his finger. His voice was indifferent and a bit sarcastic. Shouldn't you go and have your concealer replenished? Jinwan, she suddenly covered her neck with her hand, looked at him in surprise, turned around, and walked quickly into the bathroom not far away. After entering, she looked at herself in the mirror for a long time, only to find that there was only a little bit of her nipple, but it was not obvious. She had to look carefully to see it. How could Xiao Lui see this? Jinwan took out concealer from her bag and carefully applied it. When she walked out, she saw Xiao Lui standing outside the bathroom with his arms crossed and looking at her with an ambiguous smile. Is it possible between you and Mo Jingshin? I think Rong Chung is really going to introduce you to someone who is of similar social status to distract you. Jinwan didn't take it seriously. It doesn't seem to have much to do with whether I will be eaten here today. After all, he is not here now, is he? The two of them walked into the private room. As Jinwan had expected, it was filled with people she was not familiar with. There were only a few faces that she seemed to have seen at some banquets and social events, but they were all unfamiliar. Seeing Xiao Lui come in, these people were about to ask him to continue playing cards when they suddenly saw a woman beside him. They immediately glanced at Jinwan with all kinds of suggestive eyes. Rong Chung was sitting on the sofa, his handsome face lowered, as if listening to the people around him. Hearing the noise, He looked up at the door of the private room and smiled. CEO G, since you're here, don't be so reserved. Sit down and let's sit down. CEO G. Which CEO G? Which CEO G could it be? Looking at the entire country, I'm afraid the only woman with the surname G is the one from Imin Group who is respected by our CEO, Rome. Oh, I remember. She's the beauty on the Forbes list this year, right? Come on, sit down. I didn't have a chance to get to know you at the banquet last time. There were too many people at that time. What a coincidence. Beauty G, come on. Sit down and let's sit down. The people in the private room didn't see Rong Cheng's hostility towards Jinwan, and Rong Cheng didn't say anything because Xiao Lui was here, but several people could see that he was not very happy with Jinwan. So when they looked at Jinwan again, their eyes were full of all kinds of strange looks. It was rare to see someone who could make CEO Rong unhappy, especially a woman. However, Jinwan didn't even look at Rong Cheng after entering the room, but just nodded and smiled at the people around her. Someone was about to come over and shake hands with her, when Xiao Lui suddenly put his arm around her shoulder and pressed her down on a chair not far away. Oh, CEO Xiao, what are you? Take back your dog paw. Do you think you can hold Miss G's hand so easily? Xiao Lui scolded half-jokingly and helped Jinwan block those young men who were too close to her. What? Is CEO G so charming? Has CEO Xiao ushered in the second spring of his life? Instead of fighting to the death with Shernyanch, you're now fighting CEO G? Two people teased him as they handed him cigarettes. Jinwan calmly glanced at the people here. It seemed that Xiao Lui was young and frivolous when he first pursued Shernyanch. It seemed that everyone who was familiar with him knew about his dirty deeds. However, this man just narrowed his eyes and held the cigarette that had just been lit. He sat beside Jinwan and calmly puffed out a cloud of smoke, saying nothing about Shernyanch. Because of Xiao Lui's presence, the people who were curious about Jinwan didn't dare to approach, but two men and a woman by Rong Cheng's side came up, knocked on the table in front of Jinwan, and looked down at her. CEO G, since you're here, don't be so reserved. Would you like to play cards with us? There happens to be an empty table next to it. Jinwan turned to see that the table was actually a mahjong table and smiled. Sorry, I'm not very good at mahjong. Alas, why are you so modest? How many people in this business circle don't know how to play mahjong? This is a national treasure. The woman winked at her, but there was a hint of contempt in her eyes. Jinwan said frankly, I'm telling the truth. I didn't know how to play mahjong when I was in China. Later, when I was abroad, the entertainment of foreign friends didn't include mahjong, so I became even more unfamiliar with it. If you really want to play, of course, I can accompany you, but I'm too bad at mahjong. If I play too slowly, please don't mind. No, let's play together. The woman reached out and took Jinwan's arm as if they had known each other for a long time. Jinwan didn't need her to pull her. She got up, took her hand out of the woman's hand, and walked straight to the table. Chapter 607. The man looked at him in surprise. Seeing that he had sat down and was sitting next to Jinwan, he was amused. CEO Xiao, what do you mean? Xiao Lui, with a cigarette in his mouth, narrowed his eyes, rested his hand on the table casually, and glanced at him with a smile. I'm playing mahjong. What else can I mean? Isn't there another table in your room? We've just asked CEO G to sit down, and now you come up and take my seat. You're too obvious. Are you afraid that others don't know you like CEO G? Why don't I accompany the beauty I brought in and play with those drunkards? Xiao Lui puffed a smoke ring at him. They need one more player. Go and be my substitute. The man was speechless. After all, he had to suck up to CEO Rong, and he couldn't afford to offend CEO Xiao. After thinking for a while, he turned to another table in the private room. Obviously, the woman across the table didn't expect that Xiao Lui, who never played mahjong with women, would suddenly sit down. She exchanged a look with the other man in surprise, and then they looked at Jinwan. Jinwan pressed the button on the table as if nothing had happened. How do you operate this mahjong table? The woman next to her reached out and pressed the button for her. Then she glanced at Jinwan's calm face and thought that CEO Rome must have looked at her with displeasure just now. She had to find an opportunity to target her. However, Xiao Lui, who was sitting at the same table, obviously didn't intend to let them play this game. For example, if the woman and the man who came with her played a mahjong tile, and Jinwan didn't touch it, Xiao Lui would definitely get it. And Xiao Lui won 2 consecutive mahjong tiles from them. Every time Jinwan played a mahjong tile, he just skipped it. The 3 people at the table could see that he was going easy on her, and no one said anything. Of course, Jinwan wouldn't say anything. Although she didn't win, at least she won some money by hitting the bar. She didn't stand out, as she didn't lose face. This was already very satisfying, okay? Then they continued the game. This time, the cards in Jinwan's hand were slightly complicated. In the end, there were only a few cards left. It was almost time for the call. Under the urging of the woman by the side, she played a 60,000. Xiao Lui coldly glanced at the card she played and didn't speak. However, after another round, Xiao Lui won again. When he showed his cards, the woman on the opposite side looked at his cards and shouted angrily, "Mr. Xiao, you obviously have 360,000 yuan in your hand. Why didn't you bet just now? Do you think it's so easy to cheat after a fight?" Xiao Lui said calmly, "Why can't it be easy? I could have just touched you at that time." The woman had already lost hundreds of thousands of yuan in these 3 rounds. She was so angry that her hair was about to explode. The man next to her saw how agitated she was. They just wanted to suck up to Mr. Rong, but they didn't want to be so blatant in front of Mr. Xiao. He simply said, "All right, that's enough. I've seen you only win a few rounds at other tables. Do you still want to teach Mr. Xiao with your skills?" The woman heard the warning and reminder in the man's words. She paused and then stiffened. She didn't speak anymore and continued to play cards. But she was really angry. Xiao Lui had obviously gone easy on her just now. Now, he was clearly robbing her of her money. Just now, CEO Xiao had been winning against everyone's cards. Now he finally had a chance to win against Jinwan, but he didn't even want to bet. In the next few rounds, Jinwan really didn't know how to play. She just knew how to play, but she didn't play well. The woman next to her was too angry because she lost the last round. She was lucky this round and had been trying to pick on Jinwan. Finally, she won a big bet. Jinwan only put 100 chips on the table, and in an instant, the woman won more than 80. In the next 2 rounds, Jinwan looked at the 2 pitiful chips in front of her and said, "Shall I call someone else to play? I really don't know how to play. I've almost lost all my chips." Xiao Lui threw 2 dozen at her. "Use mine." Jinwan looked incredulously at the many chips in front of her. The woman on the table, the man, CEO Xiao, casually threw more than 1,000,000 yuan. No wonder he was the son of Ling Xiao Group. The woman said unhappily, "CEO Xiao, each chip is 10,000 yuan. You threw so many chips to her. If she loses all..." Before she finished, Xiao Lui glanced at Jinwan and said with a smile, "You can lose as much as you want. I'll pay for it." The woman was so angry that she almost pushed the cards in front of her down. She suppressed her temper and continued to play. They played another round. Jinwan's cards were not bad this time, and she could win several of Xiao Lui's cards. The man on the other side felt that CEO Xiao was determined to protect Jinwan, so he didn't make things difficult for her. He judged the situation and put down a card for Jinwan, letting her win 1 round. "CEO G, you said you didn't play well. Isn't it good?" the man said with a smile. Jinwan just smiled. She could understand everything on the table and didn't care about his words. However, after another round, Jinwan won again. This time, she won Xiao Lui's cards. She raised her eyes and glanced at him with a smile. "Sorry, CEO Xiao, I won again." Xiao Lui didn't bat an eyelid and lost calmly. He casually threw another handful of chips to her. "Count how much you should win." When he showed his cards, the woman on the other side saw Xiao Lui's cards and cried out, "CEO Xiao, your cards are good. Why did you break them apart?" "You broke them apart, but CEO G won every one of them." Jinwan also glanced at Xiao Lui's cards. Yes, she won every one of them. But even though she thought so, Jinwan still took the chips she should win and secretly gave Xiao Lui a grateful look. This little girl, she still pretended to be a good girl. Xiao Lui didn't pay attention to anyone. After 2 rounds, Jinwan took advantage of her sudden good luck and the generous support of the two men at the table and won several rounds in a row. In the end, the woman on the table continued to play for a while because she was unwilling to give up. Seeing that she had lost 7 or 8 million yuan, and more than half of it was won by Jinwan, she got up angrily and said, "I quit. It's boring. I'm going to drink." With that, the woman turned and slipped back to Rong Chung, but Rong Chung just watched coldly from time to time and didn't order anyone to do anything, so he couldn't comfort her now. Chapter 608. After the mahjong game was over, the man got up and went to Rong Cheng's side. Jinwan counted her chips attentively, and Xiao Lui sat on the side and laughed at her naivety. "So, just a few million yuan can make you so happy." "I'm not that happy, but I'm really happy." Jinwan put away the chips with a smile. "After all, I won the money by playing a few rounds of mahjong. It's much easier than the money I earn by flying around and signing contracts. It's free money. Why can't I be happy?" Xiao Lui sneered and was about to get up when 24 chips were suddenly thrown to him. He paused and took a look at her. "I'll pay you back with a lot of interest." With that, Jinwan got up and left the table. Xiao Lui, this private room was very large and was divided into several compartments, luxurious and well-equipped. Jinwan went to the other side after playing mahjong. Xiao Lui said a few words to the passers-by and winked at her, telling her to stay in a place with fewer people, in case those people around Rong Chung tried to make trouble for her again. Jinwan turned around and was about to find a place to sit down and send a text message to ask if Xiaoba had booked a ticket from Jing City to Hai City for her online. She didn't have to stay in Jing City for long and could leave at any time. However, as soon as she turned around, she was caught off guard by a pair of eyes. She paused, and her heart skipped a beat. His eyes were calm and dark. It seemed that he had been looking at her for a long time since he entered the room. He was calm and indifferent. Mo Jingshan's long legs moved, approaching her. Jinwan stood still and didn't move or look away, but the other people in the room all looked at them. When Mo Jingshan came in, they didn't expect that CEO Mo would come. When they finally realized what was going on, they saw that Mo Jingshan was already walking towards Jinwan. When he was about 2 meters away from them, a figure suddenly rushed over, grabbed the man's arm, and said excitedly, "Oh, Mo, you're really here? Come on, go inside and sit down." It was the woman who had been trying to make things difficult for Jinwan at the mahjong table. Mo Jingshan stopped, lowered his head, and his handsome face was indifferent. "Take your hand away." Hearing his cold words and seeing the man's unapproachable look, the woman was startled and hurriedly withdrew her hand. She didn't dare to touch him again, not even a corner of his clothes. However, after a moment of hesitation, she still said, "CEO, Mo, we didn't expect you to come. Since it's CEO Rong's arrangement today, do you want to talk to CEO Rong alone?" "No, I don't have anything to do with CEO Rong's invitation." Mo Jingshan's eyes didn't linger on the woman. When he saw the chips in Jinwan's hand, he frowned. "Did you play cards with him just now?" Ji didn't say anything. Xiao. Xiao came over with a smile. "Xiao, Mo, why?" "I played a few rounds of mahjong with Miss Ji. Are you worried?" Originally, Mo Jingshan's eyes were a bit heavy. However, when he heard that Xiao Lui had been by Jinwan's side, even playing cards with her, he glanced at Xiao Lui, and the heaviness in his eyes gradually dissipated. The Xiao family's presence saved him a lot of trouble. Xiao Lui walked over, leaned to Mo Jingshan's side, and whispered something in his ear. Of course, no one could hear what he said, not even Jinwan. She could only see Xiao Lui's enigmatic smile when he spoke and Mo Jingshan's calm and expressionless face. The people in the room stared at Mo Jingshan. They just couldn't figure out why this almighty man, who had always been difficult to invite, came here. The Rong family and the Mo family in Hai City didn't seem to have much contact with each other, so it was natural that Mo Jingshan didn't attend the Rong family's birthday party. After all, the Mo family didn't need to give the Rong family face. So it was quite surprising that Mo Jingshan came here. What was even more surprising was that Mo Jingshin said that he came here had nothing to do with CEO Rong's invitation, but CEO Rong did send him an invitation. Wasn't this the slap in CEO Rong's face in public? However, Mo Jingshin didn't look at anyone since he came in. His eyes were fixed on Jinwan. After saying a few words with CEO Xiao, everyone was still waiting for Mo Jingshin's next move. Mo Jingshin didn't even say goodbye to CEO Rong, but took Jinwan's hand and left. He took her hand. Mo Jingshin took Jinwan's hand and left in public. Except for Xiao Lui and Rong Chung. Everyone else in the room was shocked. What happened? Didn't they hear that CEO Rong's sister liked CEO Mo? Now, when she turned around and saw Rong Cheng's face, which was obviously humiliated in front of everyone, the room instantly fell silent. Before leaving, Jinwan didn't forget to exchange her chips for money. She didn't feel relieved until the money she won was actually in her card. Seeing this woman, who was worth tens of billions, acting like a money grubber, Mo Jingshin patiently waited for her and didn't urge her. Outside the restaurant, Jinwan saw Xiao, who parked the car outside and stuck his head out of the window to say hello to Jinwan. Jinwan raised her hand and waved at Xiao, who, saying hello to him. "Have you eaten?" The man asked. "I ate some cake. It's too sweet. I don't feel hungry yet," Jinwan answered truthfully. She walked to the car door and was about to raise her hand to open the door when the man next to her opened the door for her and motioned for her to get in the car. Jinwan looked at him. "I'll go back to the hotel tonight to get my luggage and go back to High City tomorrow." The man didn't seem to hear her. "Get in the car." Looking into his dark and deep eyes, Jinwan turned and got in the car. Xiao, who was still in the same state, automatically blocking out all the sounds behind the car and concentrating on driving. It seemed that he was driving to the hotel where she lived, not Shengtang Hotel. When they arrived at the hotel, Mo Jingshin obviously didn't intend to leave. He asked Xiao who to drive back to Shengtang Hotel alone. Jinwan wanted to tell him to go back, but the man said that he would send her back to her room to see if her temperature was stable below 37 degrees. After making sure she was fine, he would leave. He had asked Xiao who to drive the car away. Where could he go? Jinwan pursed her lips and didn't speak. She entered the elevator expressionlessly and went upstairs, ignoring the man beside her. Chapter 609. Before she finished speaking, the doorbell suddenly rang. Jinwan paused and turned to look at the door that had just been closed. Who would ring the doorbell at this time? She didn't see any room service staff on this floor, and it was already past 8 o'clock. Even room service wouldn't bother her at this time. Jinwan put down the thermometer and was about to open the door when she looked back to see that Mo Jingshin had picked up the thermometer she had just put down and looked at it, as if to make sure if she still had a fever. In less than a minute, Jinwan's cell phone also rang. She picked it up and saw that it was a call from Xiao Ba. She picked it up. "Hello, boss, aren't you in the room?" Xiao Ba's voice came from the phone and outside the door. "Jinwan, was it you who rang the doorbell just now?" "It was me." Xiao Ba smiled. "I just came out of the bathroom on the first floor of the hotel and vaguely saw your back entering the elevator. I ran over and didn't catch up with the elevator. I just came up now." Jinwan put down the phone and was about to open the door when she paused and suddenly raised her hand to grab Mo Jingshin's arm. This was the first time she had taken the initiative to touch him since returning to China. The man had just put down the thermometer. Because of her action, his elegant and deep brows moved slightly. He glanced at her, but Jinwan pushed him into the bathroom without saying a word and raised her hand to make a should gesture at Mo Jingshin's puzzled and even somewhat puzzled gaze. Mo Jingshin. The bathroom door was mercilessly closed by Jinwan. Although there was nothing shameful about Mo Jingshin, the relationship between her and Mo Jingshin was, after all, unclear. Xiao Ba had been particularly excited when she saw him, as if her boss would soon return to the Mo family. Right now, if she were to discover Mo Jingshin in her room at such a late hour in Jing City, it was likely that her mind would come up with a long romantic love story. Most importantly, she could not stop her excitement. Furthermore, Xiao Ba was especially fawning over Mo Jingshan and could not wait to shove her into Great Boss Mo's arms. TSK. So she'd better not let Xiao Ba see it. After confirming that the person in the bathroom was cooperative and did not intend to come out, Jin Wan turned to open the door. As soon as the door was opened, Xiao Ba looked into the room behind Jin Wan. She couldn't see inside, so she stood on tiptoe and peeped in. Jin Wan's eyelids jumped. What are you looking at? Is there anyone else in your room? No. Jin Wan lowered her hand from the doorknob. Xiao Ba directly walked in with a small suitcase. She glanced around and then said with a smile, "You've been in Beijing with CEO, Mo, for so many days. I thought the two of you would be together." Jin Wan glanced at the small suitcase in Xiao Ba's hand and changed the topic. "Why did you suddenly come to Beijing?" Once they got down to business, Xiao Ba turned around and said, "Didn't you say that you had a fever yesterday when you called me to help you book the plane ticket? I was afraid that there would be no convenient person to take care of you in Beijing. After all, you didn't even bring an assistant this time, and I was afraid that no one would take care of you if you had a fever on the way back. So after hanging up the phone in the morning, I've booked the plane ticket for tomorrow. I'll go back to High City with you. It's just a fever. It will go down in a day. It's no big deal." Seeing that she had come, Jin Wan didn't say anything else and took a look at the time. "What time does the flight back to High City leave tomorrow?" 10:30 in the morning. "Then you can stay here for one night. We'll go back together tomorrow," Jin Wan said, and was about to call the hotel front desk to book another room. Seeing Jin Wan's plan, Xiao Ba hurriedly said, "Boss, you don't have to book a room for me. Your room is not small. Isn't there a sofa? I can sleep on the sofa." Jin Wan was about to take the room's landline phone when she paused and looked back to see that Xiao Ba had put her suitcase on the edge of the sofa, as if she was going to make do with it for the night. Xiao Ba had lived in the same apartment with Jin Wan in England and even slept on Jin Wan's bed. They were very familiar with each other, so there was no need to treat her as an outsider. Jin Wan glanced inconspicuously in the direction of the bathroom and picked up the room's landline phone. "This sofa is too small. It's not comfortable to sleep on. You flew here in a hurry today and have to fly back tomorrow. You should have a good sleep after traveling for 2 days in a row. I'll book a room for you on this floor. There's really no need. This sofa is big enough. It's a double sofa. I'm small, and it's big enough to accommodate me," Xiao Ba said as she pressed the sofa twice with her hand. "It's very comfortable. It's not much worse than a bed. Boss, you really don't have to book a room for me. I came here to take care of you and accompany you." Jin Wan didn't seem to hear her. She had already made the call and booked a room closer to hers from the hotel front desk. She told Xiao Ba that she would go downstairs with her ID card to check in a while, and then hung up the phone. Hearing that the room had been booked, Xiao Ba had to sit on the sofa and look at Jin Wan's back, sighing. "What a waste. It costs at least 3,000 or 4,000 yuan to stay in this hotel for a night. Why'd you book a room for me? When I was with you in London, we could squeeze into a small apartment for the most difficult year and survive. Now you don't have to be so extravagant. I can even sleep on the floor, not to mention the sofa." Jin Wan glanced at her with a smile. "How can I bear to let you sleep on the floor?" In the bathroom, Mo Jingshun, who had slept on the floor more than once not long ago, "There's a hard way to live in difficult times, and there's a good way to live in good times. It's not like you can't afford to live in this kind of hotel with your monthly salary. Why are you talking to me about being thrifty?" Jin Wan chuckled. Xiao Ba rested her chin on the sofa with one hand and looked at her with a smile. "I see that you're too good to me, so I wanted to say that you don't have to be so good to me. I heard that you had a fever and specially came to take care of you, but you refused to let me stay with you. Tell me, is it because you're used to living alone in the past 2 years? You started to dislike me the moment I came. Don't talk nonsense. It's getting late. The room is diagonally opposite. Someone will send the room card up in a moment. Go check in, take a shower, and go to bed early. You have to get up early tomorrow to go to the airport." Xiao Ba clicked his tongue. "Boss, you're asking me to leave too hastily. I can't sleep now anyway. I'll just sleep if I go back to my room. I might as well chat with you here for a while." Jin Wan, this damn girl. Chapter 610. Seeing Jean Wan like this, it seemed that she was really tired. Xiaoba had to get up, pick up her small suitcase, make a goodbye gesture, and turn to leave. However, as soon as she passed the bathroom door, she suddenly heard a cell phone ringing inside. Little Eight stopped in his tracks and glanced at the bathroom door in surprise. "Why is there?" Jean Wan quickly walked over and stood between Xiaoba and the door before she reached out to push it open. "I put my cell phone inside and forgot to take it out." Xiaoba was stunned. "Boss, your cell phone ringtone is different from this. I was bored a few days ago, so I changed my cell phone ringtone. Is that okay?" "Is that so?" Xiaoba felt that something was wrong, but from her angle, she couldn't see what was going on in the bathroom. Besides, this was Jean Wan's room, so she didn't have to care too much, but she felt that boss's expression was indescribably strange. Xiaoba blinked, looked at the bathroom door behind Jean Wan, and said, "Then I'm really going back to my room. Hurry up." Jean Wan reached out to push her to the door. The door opened, and Xiaoba walked out with her suitcase. She turned back to say goodnight to Jean Wan. Jean Wan nodded, waved her hand, and closed the door. She finally left, and Jean Wan breathed a sigh of relief at the door. Just now, for some reason, she had a strange feeling that she would be caught cheating at any time. Jean Wan turned to open the door, but the doorbell suddenly rang again. She paused and turned to open the door. Xiaoba was still standing outside, but she was holding a stack of documents in her hand. "I forgot just now. You haven't been in High City these days, so I brought the backlog of documents that you have to sign in person. Do you want to sign them tonight or on the plane tomorrow?" Jean Wan glanced at the titles of the documents. They were all very urgent projects. If she didn't sign them, the implementation of the projects would be delayed. She raised her hand to take them. "I'll read them now. There are a few documents that I have to explain to you in detail. After that, I'll go back to my room." All right. Business was important. She would let her stay in the bathroom. 20 minutes later, Xiao Ba gave Jean Wan a brief account of the documents and things that needed to be explained. Seeing that Jean Wan had understood almost everything, Xiao Ba left. The room was completely quiet. Jean Wan took 2 deep breaths, sat on the sofa, looked at the documents in her hand, and glanced at the door from time to time. After confirming that the person had really left, she put down the documents, stood up, and rushed into the bathroom. She opened the bathroom door and looked in. She thought that Mo Jingshun, who had never suffered such grievances before, would find a place to sit by the bathtub or stand inside to look at her expressionlessly. However, when she opened the door, she also turned on the light outside the bathroom. She raised her eyes and met the man's gaze in the full-length mirror. The man's back was tall and straight, and he did not look like he had suffered any grievances after being locked inside. His phone was muted and placed aside. His eyes weren't as cold and indifferent as they usually were in front of others, nor were they as warm and gentle as they usually were in front of her. There was only a hint of indifference, laziness, and sexiness. The collar of his shirt was open. He was wearing a neat shirt and trousers, but now he looked very casual, because he was shaving. Before Jean Wan could speak, she saw the man, with the help of the light in the bathroom, slowly clean the unfinished beard foam on both sides of his cheeks. This man was really calm at all times. From the outside, it seemed that there was no light in the bathroom, but it was not that there was no light in the bathroom. After all, the translucent frosted glass could still shine some light in the room. So he found something to do here and simply picked up the free razor and beard foam in the hotel bathroom to kill time. This kind of silent razor couldn't be heard outside. Jean Wan looked at the man standing in front of the mirror and suddenly withdrew her gaze. "When are you leaving?" "I'll go back to High City with Xiaoba tomorrow. That girl is used to sticking to me and may run into my room to chat at any time of night. It's really inconvenient for you to stay here." He took a look at her, unhurriedly applied the beard foam on his cheeks and chin, and casually said before picking up the razor, "How shameful am I?" Jean Wan, she pursed her lips. "I just don't want to cause unnecessary misunderstanding. Xiaoba is naive and simple. She always thinks that there is no ill will between us and that we may remarry at any time. I don't want to be nosy, and I don't want to explain too much, so you'd better leave as soon as possible. The man wasn't surprised. I know what you're angry about, and I know what you're concerned about. It's just that everything I'm doing is out of good intentions, so you can't bring yourself to do it. You're stuck in the middle, not knowing when to advance or retreat. Jinwan didn't speak, but glanced at him. Mo Jingshin, are we divorced or not? The man glanced at her in the mirror and smiled. Where did you find out about it? Why do you suddenly ask this question? Jinwan stood at the door of the bathroom and said with a straight face, I just thought that with your ability, a signed divorce agreement could definitely solve everything. But then I felt something was wrong. He glanced at her and shaved his face twice with the razor. He said lightly, a woman's sixth sense is indeed accurate at times. Jinwan, what did he mean? Did he mean? Jinwan suddenly walked over and quickly to the man's side. So, are we divorced or not? It was you who gave me the divorce agreement. After I signed it and sent it to you, you should sign it and go to settle the divorce. We don't have any unwelcome relationship or irrelevant ties at all, do we? However, the man didn't speak. He unhurriedly took the razor and looked at the mirror methodically. Then he suddenly frowned and handed the razor to her. Jinwan looked at him speechlessly. What are you doing? The gift from the hotel is not easy to use. The direction of the blade is very poor. If I shave it myself, there will probably be a few more cuts. Help me. As the man spoke, he turned around. At the same time, taking care of her height, he bent down slightly and tilted his face in her direction. Chapter 611. But why did he ask her to do it for him? Jinwan ignored him and didn't take it. She just looked at him coldly. Mo Jingshin, didn't you hear what I asked you just now? Or did you pretend not to hear it? The man raised his eyebrows. Help me clean these beard bubbles first. Don't you have your own hands? No matter how bad the razor in this high-class hotel is, it won't ruin your face. Do it yourself. Mo Jingshin sighed and snorted with a smile. Didn't you say you had another parent? You ungrateful brat? Jinwan immediately rolled her eyes. If Mo Jingshin hadn't successfully persuaded her with this reason, she would have never seen him again in this life, separated by mountains and seas of people. She suddenly raised her hand angrily, took the razor from the man's hand, and then raised it to shave for him. She frowned and said, I don't know how to use this thing. Don't blame me if I ruin your face. Well, I won't blame you. The man looked at her calmly and gently. Because Jinwan had to raise her hand to shave for him, the two of them were very close. He looked at her carefully shaving his face, and his lips, which were covered by the white beard bubbles, gave a warm smile. Jinwan didn't see the man smile, but when she helped him shave, she could feel the subtle changes on his face. She could also see the patience and gentleness in his eyes when he looked at her, and even the obvious satisfaction of being helped by her. She originally wanted to end the battle quickly, but because of the man's gaze, she couldn't help but ease her strength, lest she accidentally scratched his face. After all, even if this man didn't rely on the company to make a living, he could still rely on his face to make a living. She couldn't really hurt him. Furthermore, to be honest, this man, Mo Jingshin, was really one of a kind. Before she married him at the age of 20, she didn't even know about the relationship between the two of them. She thought that she had seen a lot of handsome men. But since she met Mo Jingshin, she realized that those people she had met were not the best. Jinwan's hands became lighter and slower. After much difficulty, she was finally done. She saw that the man was still standing in front of her with a faint smile. It was clear that he wanted her to help him clean up as though she was repaying a favor. If they were really talking about repaying the debt of gratitude, she had been pressed on the bed by him for an entire night. Did that mean that she had already repaid him? Jinwan looked at him with a fierce look. Seeing that he was still standing there, she simply pulled down a white towel next to her and wiped off the white, mini shaving foam on the man's face. After wiping off the last bit of foam, Jinwan said expressionlessly and anxiously, Okay, now can you say? Before she moved the towel away from the man's face and finished her words, the man suddenly bent down and kissed her. At the same time, he held her in his arms and held her tightly in his arms. Jinwon hurriedly opened her mouth to bite him, but the man took the opportunity to deepen the kiss. In an instant, Jinwon's mouth was filled with the minty flavor of shaving foam. The kiss came too suddenly, and the man was too tall. Jinwon raised her head and was kissed for a long time, unable to break free. Then she was pressed back a few steps by the man until her back was against the wall of the bathroom. The kiss did not separate and became deeper and heavier. She was kissed until she was almost suffocated, seeing stars, and her limbs were weak. At the same time, alarm bells rang in her heart. She hurriedly raised her hand and pushed against his chest hard. When he paused and lowered his eyes to look at her because he thought she was uncomfortable, she said angrily, "Imo Jingshen, let's finish talking. What do you want to talk about?" The man's dark eyes were locked on her. "Don't you already have the answer in your heart?" Jinwon looked at him in disbelief. "You? What answer could she have?" Before seeing the divorce certificate or the divorce agreement, she would never believe it. It was absolutely impossible. When a man bent down and was about to kiss her again, Jinwon raised her foot and stepped hard on his shoe. Even though the man was wearing high-end handmade Italian leather shoes, she was wearing thin, high-heeled shoes, which she hadn't changed after returning to the room. The man paused, but didn't move. He only pressed his forehead against hers. When she stepped on him harder and harder until it hurt, he only smiled and said hoarsely, "I said I would give you time. These few days in Jing City, I really couldn't control myself. I'm very sorry about what happened 2 nights ago. From now on, as long as I don't get your permission, I definitely won't do anything." In? Jinwon glared at him. "Then what are you doing now? You are too seductive. I just want to kiss you." The man's eyes were sincere, and his voice was low and gentle. Obviously, he was coaxing her. There was a faint mint smell in the man's body, and now there was also a mint smell in the lingering smell of his beard. It smelled so good that Jinwon's senses were stimulated. She leaned back against the wall. "You've kissed me. Let go of me." Seeing that she was about to explode again, Imo Jingshin raised his hand and stroked her head. He didn't kiss her again, but whispered against her lips, "Must you leave tomorrow? I have nothing to do in Jing City. I've been away from High City for more than a week. I've finished my work. Of course I should go back. If I don't leave, do you want me to stay here and be a fat piece of meat in your mouth?" The man laughed at her metaphor. "I'll just take a look. I won't eat it. I don't believe you." Jinwon pushed him hard, and the man finally let go of her. He took a step back, but the collar of his shirt was open because he had just shaved his face. He lowered his eyes to look at her. No matter how she looked at it, it seemed like he was deliberately seducing her. "You heard it just now. My plane is tomorrow morning, and I have a lot of company documents brought by Xiaoba to read tonight." When the man let go of her, Jinwon turned to open the bathroom door and pointed to the stack of documents on the sofa outside. Mo Jingshun glanced at her, as if saying, "I'm going to work and have no time to deal with you," and smiled. "All right, I'll go back and ask Xiao who to drive you to the airport tomorrow morning. No, we can call a car. Xiaoba and I can drive. It's better to rent a car than to bother your assistant." Jinwon had been treating him as an outsider. Before returning to High City, she seemed to be thousands of feet away from him. And Mo Jingshun didn't force her. He glanced at the thermometer she put on the table and turned to leave. As soon as he left the room, the door diagonally opposite suddenly opened. "You're tuning into the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.